Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Sri Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you everyone for joining the January Darbar hosted by Bunga Azaadi. Today we've got a couple of topics we'll go through. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat, just in case you can't and then something's gone seriously wrong. But hopefully you can hear me. Please let me know. And then what we'll do today essentially is we'll go through a couple of updates from the Bunga, what we've done over this sort of month. And then we'll got a presentation by Sikh Journal by Paul Singh, and then we're going to go through some of the before we go to the presentation, we'll do a Sikh Spaces project sort of like introduction. It's a kind of new section of the Vichaar repository we've released, and we really want cool, thank you Hargeet Singh, and we really want kind of your participation as a Sangat to basically help us out, offer your contributions, your ideas. We're essentially trying to create a repository of basic case studies and even like kind of like quote unquote business plans for how to set up your own Sikh space. But again, I'll go through this a bit more in detail in a second. But first, let's quickly just check the Instagram account so I can remind myself of any posts that may have been controversial over the month. Let me just check. Okay, so yeah, we've launched this new Vichaar repository, which I shall show you in a second a bit more as well. This thing here. In fact, I might show you now actually. So we used to use last month or the month before, I announced that we're going to be using a app called AnyType to host all of Bunga Azaadi's Vichars, or the Vichars that we've collected and curated over time. Now the app is brilliant, functionality wise, UI wise. It does serve the purpose properly, but it has a few limitations that I think me making a mistake, I didn't really think far enough ahead. And one of the biggest limitations was that because it's not hosted online, there's no URL for each specific Vichar, and that's an issue because if you wanted to share a Vichar, it makes it very difficult. So what we needed to do was basically like an online version of that Vichar repository. That AnyType Vichar repository is still there, you can still do it, and it's an offline kind of app sort of thing, but again, there's too many barriers to entry. You have to like make an account, you can remember your password, all that kind of stuff, and it's too much friction. Whereas something like this is very easy, just bungaazadi.com. You can access it through azadism.co.uk as well, but we've got a new domain now, bungaazadi.com. And essentially this should collect everything that we've done. It's got I think about 90% of stuff of what we basically produced so far in this website. And the way it works is that at a high level you have these kind of like different sections of the Vichar repository, and you can go to the website and we'll go through how to use it as well. So we've got Rajniti Vidya, so all the Vichars related to Rajnitis in here. We've got Khalsa Revival, the Dalamul Pipeline white paper. If you haven't read it already, I highly recommend it. I've also produced a video, it's more like a video recording with subtitles, which you can sort of listen through as well if you haven't got the attention span to read. So I'll upload that soon, maybe within the next week or two. We do need servers and help for this. Quite a few people have come forward as well, expressing interest, especially over in the US side. So hopefully we can start pushing this a bit further and progressing this pipeline. So this is pretty positive, this is. Khalsa Nama, of course, so a lot of the Khalsa related Vichars related to the Khalsa's, the Guru Khalsa's status, its mindset, the traditions, etc, right? And then lastly, not just the basis of Sikhi, which is the third section of the Vichar repository. And this relates to things that are going to be a bit more advanced, things like the history of Sikhi, the Harsology, Vichar Vidya, and there's another one coming soon, Sikh Metaphysics. A lot of it is done, I've just not had time to upload it yet. Some of it needs checking, but I would like to have contributions from members of the Sangat who enjoyed that side of Sikhi, where it's deeply ingrained in the sort of like Piri side of things. Do contribute. We're going to try to basically orient Sikh philosophy in such a way where if you're coming at it, you're not coming at it in a way where it's like a bit jumbled. Instead, here's a structured way in which to progress it. Here's the base principles. Here's the core like sort of truths and foundations, and here's the sort of like secondary layer belief system and what's the utility of that, and then you go on to like, well, how do you build civilization from a truth layer, a belief layer, and now this sort of like civilizational society layer. So we'll do that. That should be an interesting one. But yeah, this is the Vichaar repository. It comes in dark mode and light mode. There's also a little graph view thing. This is a mess compared to any types version where it's like a tree, kind of like branch-like thing, where this is more like a web. So this isn't as useful in my opinion. Like, I'm sure you can like hover over and see all the stuff. But ideally I want it to branch like the AnyType repo does. I think there's ways to do it in the code. We just need to figure out what part of the code does it, and we can adjust the forces, whatever. But yeah, that is that. Let me know your feedback on this, and do you have an exploration of it? There are some formatting errors throughout it that needs to be polished up still. So if you do identify any, just get in touch and then we can rectify it. But what I wanted to show you today is this, basically the Statecraft. Within the Statecraft section of the Vichaar repository, there's a new project, the 6 spaces one, which I'll go through in a second. Let me just check the Instagram first. Okay, yeah, Dasambani doubt. So there was a couple of doubts going around around Dasambani, apparently some posts that got controversial. So I thought I'd just jump on the bandwagon and give some Vichaar from the Bunga side related to Dasambani. And I thought actually, because there's so much already people have sort of done on this area to really quell the doubts, I thought I'd just use the opportunity just to tag in like everyone I think is really useful on this topic, and then just orient it. So I split it out into like historical, cultural, literal, political. Like these are the kind of factors that contribute to Dasambani doubt, and how can we reconcile each one, right? So I think generally when we ever want to solve a problem, it's good to, I think, categorize what the problem is into sections, rather than getting overwhelmed by the whole thing. And that way you can sort of like divert resources where they need to be, and that sort of thing. So obviously you can go through this post and see all the contributions various pages and projects, etc. have made towards dispelling Dasambani doubt, especially to my mind. So hopefully this is useful for you guys. Another one, it was this idea of the Khalsa Panthi, a label we can use as people who adhere to the Guru Khalsa. Again, we did a poll here, and I think the poll actually resulted. I can't see it on the desktop version, but most people said they wouldn't like this term or something. So it was a good way to get the feedback on that one. I still like the term Khalsa Panthi, and I probably still will use it. But I don't think it's probably going to be a replacement for the term Sikh. But I do still think the argument here is strong that the like to say you're just a Sikh is kind of inaccurate. You have to say like, oh, I'm a Sikh of Guru Nanak, I'm a Sikh of Guru Gobind Singh, right? Because like a Sikh would like, you have lots of Sikhs of many things, right? But like obviously that's a bit of a mouthful, etc. So yeah, obviously read through this post if you're interested in hearing the argument further and what people's Vichaar were on this. This was a kind of reel I did. It was more for fun really, as a little experiment. But a lot of people sort of liked it, and I've been told to do more of these kind of ones. But my issue is, right, this isn't really that informative. It's, yeah, like it touches a certain spot, like emotionally for people. But like, what kind of really value is this really? Like, they're not really informative. But I guess like this is what Instagram's about, right? Like it is designed to like capture the attention in a short space and give you a bit of like a dopamine hit. So I guess it hit that. Maybe that's why it was successful. But I might do more. But the idea behind this was I saw another video, literally the exact same format, but it was like just more general, like looking at spaceships or whatever, like human flourishing. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool one to make into a sort of Khalsa version. So I just literally just like ripped the idea and put a Khalsa spin on it. People liked it. But I might do it more like that. It helps the page out, I guess, grow a bit. What else did we do? Oh, yeah, the Khalsa Games community is a good one. We're going to rename it to the Khalsa Games Club now. So it's something that a couple of the guys are working on. I took the initiative on. So hopefully this starts getting a bit of a traction and people start using it to connect with each other and play some military simulation games. I would probably place this as a kind of input center for one of the input centers for the Darbar pipeline. It's a good way, basically trying to connect with young Sikhs, especially who may be playing like nonsense kind of games that don't really provide that much value. But instead of just sort of banning the medium altogether and being anti it, let's just channel the medium in a way that might be beneficial for us all. Oh, is the music still high? Oh, hold on, let me turn it off. Sorry. Good thing you mentioned that. Okay, cool. So yeah, so essentially with this, the idea is to get a lot of young Sikhs to get themselves into like a passion for like military kind of kind of games, and then from that sort of population, hopefully we can then encourage them to actually consider careers as not just virtual soldiers but real life soldiers, or law enforcement, etc. Right, or armed personnel. So that's a potential route. There might be well, we're working on an Instagram page for the Castle Games Club. So if you guys want to join that and stuff when it launches, please do. And let's see this project grow. Another one we did was this lessons from Mossad for the Khalsa. I think some people should have actually read the post because some people thought I was praising Mossad. Like, I was like, no, like there's a nuanced discussion to be had here. There's things you can learn from, especially like entities which you might not 100% agree with, but are objectively successful in metrics that we as the Khalsa would seek success in as well. For example, like defending your population sort of thing. But obviously the nuances there is like, well, how far do you go in that pursuit, right? Like, how do you make the value judgments? So Mossad is a very competent force in the world, so it's worth studying, even if you might think the morals are grey. And again, the moral questions as well is also worth studying. But what will be foolish is just dismissing the entire conversation because you don't like Mossad, you don't like Israel, whatever. It's like, no, not really. Like, look, you have to use your brains here a little bit. The idea is that we're living in an information age where we have more information accessible to us than ever before in history, ever, right? Like in your pocket, you have this phone, and you can just Google any of libraries upon libraries of information. So we're fools not to take a lot of the lessons from wherever we can get them, like both what we should do and what we should avoid, kind of thing as well. So a lot of this is about sifting through the dirt and finding the gold, and that's what I was trying to do with this post as well. And a lot of people did like it, and I did have some good jars related to it as well. It's actually a post was recommended to the Bunga to do a few months ago, and I never got round to do it. I did a early draft, and then I got round recently to publishing it. So there's that one, and then there's an alternative nationalism. Everything else I think is a bit older now, but yeah, that's basically what we sort of did there during post-wise during the month. I think December as well, because we missed December's Darbar. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so let's go on to the Seek Spaces project, which I'm pretty excited to share with you guys about. So essentially the idea of the Seek Spaces project is that we should start looking at things like Gurdwara and Seek Spaces on a local level as an opportunity to experiment at statecraft, and getting it right, so that when we get to a higher scale in which we're attempting statecraft, we would have already learned many of the lessons on that micro scale. And the beauty of doing things on micro scales first is that if you fail on a micro scale, the impacts of it isn't as widespread. Because imagine now we have like a generic kind of stereotypical Gurdwara committee that we all seem to like have a negative connotations towards. And don't get me wrong, there's many Gurdwara committees who are actually very, very competent and productive, and should do deserve our support, sort of thing. But there's also many who are sort of tarnishing the entire reputation of the Gurdwara committee system in general as well. But imagine, like, some of these kind of stereotypical bad committees getting in charge of a nation state. It would be a disaster. Like, there's very little professionalism in general in this band, and having these kind of like bad processes and systems at that scale and that level, you're going to end up with mass suffering, and you're going to bottleneck prosperity. So let's not go down that route where we're trying to rush in to get to a nation state, but we don't have the foundations set. Let's use opportunities like Seek Spaces to develop the necessary competency and skills and level of thinking before we even get to that stage. There's no reason why we shouldn't be using these as experiments to achieve such things. So what this project is a way to help facilitate that by becoming a repository of kind of wisdom for anyone seeking to start their own Seek Space. So just to read it out here, so this project is an attempt at outlining various types of Seek Spaces and offers a platform for the Sangat interested in designing and implementing their own Seek Space to gather knowledge to help them in their endeavour. We also seek to address current pitfalls and reorient how we think about Seek Spaces, If you would like to get involved, please get in touch. So yeah, this is going to be a collaborative effort. We've basically tried to assimilate it with a structure, but to fill out the skeleton, put the meat on the bones, so to speak, we need your support as the Sangha to come forward and offer ideas. And many of you guys do have brilliant ideas in this sort of like sort of area. But here's an opportunity where we can collect them and archive them as well. So yeah, I'll actually start going through the process of how each one works. So here's the types of Sikh spaces we've sort of outlined so far that we believe that all kind of Sikh spaces should sort of fall within one of these sort of categories. There may be more, and if you can suggest more, please let us know and argue for the case. But in general, what we have is the most fundamental building block of a Sikh space. We're sort of classifying as a Shoni, and a Shoni is essentially just a campment. So this could be something as simple as a kind of like plot of land, maybe like an acre or two or something like very small, where a couple of things pool funds together and they use that land as a multi-purpose space. So I basically outlined the idea from modern Shonis in this Vichaar here, which I encourage you guys to read. And essentially what the idea is with all this is instead of jumping to a Gurdwara as a Sikh space to begin with, let's start on smaller, more manageable scales, prove the concept, prove the demand, and then scale up as needed sort of thing. Because what happens now is that anyone sort of can just like buy out an old factory building, refurbish it a little bit, and then order a printed sarup from China or something, and then start calling it a Gurdwara, and then it has to start emotionally blackmailing all the Sangat around it to say, oh, we're a Gurdwara, we're going to get shut down if we can't pay the bills, pay up, give us the swan sort of thing. But like nobody asked you to make that Gurdwara in the first place, especially when there's 10 already in the same city. So it's like, what is this system? It's loopy. Instead of jumping to this thing called a Gurdwara, why not start on a smaller scale, something more manageable, maybe something more practical, for example with the Shoni concept, because it's just basically an empty plot of land sort of thing. You don't even have to be in the city to do this, and you can actually use that space to like set up like an organic farm or a stable or something like that, right? Or something I've written here as a multi-purpose land use is essentially just pick one day a month to do your Darbar, in which you have something like you can have a sarup there if you'd like to, where you bring it in, or you can do Shastra Prakash, and then you get the Sangat all together on that day, and then you do Path, you do Rag Kirtan, you do Katha, all this kind of stuff on that one day, right? Instead of every day. And that one day becomes a very special day of the month, where you can actually prioritize quality over quantity. You can do longer on that day, etc., right? And then the rest of the days of the month, the rest of the 29 days or whatever, you can devote those days to practical activities in which it generates actual income and revenue, which you can use then to grow the Shoni further. So those things could be anything, like obviously within the parameters of Sikh principles and Khalsa ethos. So things like organic farms or setting up a stable, like I just mentioned, or even some type of like camping kind of arrangement where people can hire a camping space, that kind of thing, right? Or even venue hire, so you can do like Khalsa weddings or whatever. So stuff like that would generate the income during the month, and then you have one day of the month, which is your Darbar essentially, right, where you bring the Maharaj through, you do the part, you got the Sangat there, etc., right? And then if you want to, then at that point, then you can basically decide either to stay small if your Sangat isn't that big, which is fine. Having a Shoni is completely fine. Or if you want to expand it, then you can expand it, maybe not to a Gurdwara, but something else instead. So what I've outlined instead is something called a Dharamsal, which is what was more common in the past anyway, before the term Gurdwara was popularized. Dharamsals is what we used to call Sikh spaces, especially before even any the printing press and Guru Granth Sahib Sarups or even that permeated throughout Sikh society. So something like Dharamsals is what you generally have, and then you can see in Janam Sakhis, whatever, it's Dharamsals and stuff is what's being referenced, not necessarily a Gurdwara. So when we actually get to the Gurdwara is more like especially in Bani and stuff, well, from what we sort of like researched, it seems to be more of a spiritual space referring to the internal environment rather than an external environment, which is fine. I mean, words can evolve over time. It's fine. We said like the Khalsa, Bhagavad Kabir had a specific definition of what Khalsa meant, and the Guru Gobind Singh Ji then materialized that definition into a structured institution of sorts. So these things are fine to do, but I think what we should be careful of is diluting things, which I think is what happened with the Gurdwara space. We've diluted stuff. Where I think in actuality, a lot of Gurdwaras should not have the status of a Gurdwara. It should probably have a status of a Dharamsala instead. And okay, so that's the Dharamsala. Another option is a Shastraghat. So instead of having a actual Guru Granth Sahib Sarup in these structures, instead perhaps we could do something like where you have a building and instead like a permanent structure where a Shoni sort of develops into. And instead you have a permanent Shastra Prakash instead, which again is something more common in the past before the printing press. You'd have like Shahidastans, memorials to Shaheed essentially. They'd have Balakis, but with just Shastra on them, and the Sangh would come and they will venerate them instead. So there's very flexible sort of system we need to start developing rather than just sort of assuming if you want to set up a Sikh space, set up a Gurdwara, right? There's many other types of Sikh spaces we can set up. So when we get to the Gurdwara stage, right, sorry, let me get to it, then this should be, in theory, the pinnacle of a Sikh space, right? And I'm arguing that, like, I give a little story here as well in this Vichaar about what are the minimum standards for a Gurdwara probably should be. It's like, well, let's say you're doing prajar to like a non-Sikh, and you're sort of telling the non-Sikh, oh yeah, our Guru is the king of kings, right? They're the divine presence on the earth, all this kind of stuff, right? And then obviously you're hyping it up to the Gora or whoever it is, right, the non-Sikh. And the non-Sikhs are, oh wow, okay, well, how do I meet this? Like, where is this, right? I go, oh yeah, we got this temple, right? It's called a Gurdwara. This is where the King of Kings is residing there. And then like, and the non-Sikhs are, oh, can I come with you then? I want to see it for myself, kind of thing. So as you're going there, the non-Sikhs are probably going to think, because you hyped it up so much, oh, it's going to be like this massive like palatial building, and like it's going to be super like great architecture, everything's going to be golden, all that kind of stuff, right? And then they end up going to like an old factory building that's been like shoddily refurbished, like the taps are broken, all this kind of stuff, the carpets are faded, and you go up, right, and you go into the Darbar to expect to see the Guru there, this King of Kings, but instead of what you see is this plastic balki with fake gold on it. And it's like, well, it's kind of embarrassing at that point. Like, is this what we're hyping it up as Kings of Kings, but then we put them on like a plastic balki in an old like rundown industrial building? Like, that's not what a Gurdwara should be. And I think this is a result of, again, over permeation, of us basically just defaulting to Gurdwara as Sikh spaces. But instead, maybe we should do something where, okay, well, we should only have very few Gurdwara. And those Gurdwaras should be of the best standard. It should be the most prominent building in the entire city, not just some kind of like backwards thing you see on the edge of it, right? It should be the building that the city is known for. So, like, for example, in Istanbul, right, they've got the Hagia Sophia. Like, when people think of the city of Istanbul, they think of that building. That's how prominent that building is. That's how a Gurdwara should be. That should be the status of a Gurdwara. Okay, so to enforce this kind of like scarcity of Gurdwara, how do we sort of do it? Like, what are the minimum standards a Gurdwara should have? And this is when I'm proposing the SAS standard: the security, the aesthetic, and the sarup, right? So first and foremost, if the building you're erecting to house the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup in is not secure, then you should not have a right to house the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup. It's irresponsible. It should have a 24/7 security detail guarding the building, the Sangha, and the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup at all times, the most advanced security systems. If you don't have that, well, it's embarrassing, because you look at world leaders like Biden or Trump, whatever, right? They have the Secret Service around them. They have all these kind of like elite security details, close protection officers, etc. Yet what do we have? We have a half asleep Gyanni who doesn't even realize like Balkis get stolen sometimes. So it's like, is this is the kind of like disparity between what we say as a Panth and what we sort of like give the lip service to versus what we actually treat the Guru like in reality. So I think the minimum thing we need is security, and it's, the presentation we'll go into a bit later might touch on this Biadbi concept a bit more. But yeah, it is a way to prevent Biadbi by having solid security. If you can't ensure this, the sanctity and the security of the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup, you should not have a Guru Granth Sahib Sarup in your sort of like vicinity, in your building. Right? It's irresponsible. Second thing, aesthetic. It's got to look beautiful, and I know that's a subjective standard, but we should aim to get as close to objectively understood as beautiful as possible, right? We should hire the world's best architects to design these buildings and stuff. This sort of thing will vastly reduce the amount of people you can actually set up a Gurdwara, because the amount of funds required, the amount of effort, the skill, the talent required, it really drastically reduces how many Gurdwara you can have that are matching these kind of minimum standards. And the last thing, and I probably might argue this a bit more in another Darbar in more time, or maybe in the question answer section later on, but I also believe to create the artificial scarcity, we should also then radically redefine what we constitute as a Sargun Swarup of the Guru Granth Sahib. I don't think we should accept that any Swarup without the 3 criteria set out, as it has to be handwritten, it's got to be Lariwar, and it's got to match all the spellings and include all the characters and sections of at least one of the Bharat and Bs, which would need to have like a receipt. Okay, this is based on this Bharat and B kind of thing. If it does not have those 3 criteria, it cannot be classed as a Sargun Swarup of the Guru, in my mind, right? Instead, what they should be is relegated to the status of a Gotka or a Poti Sahib, which obviously require respect as well. Like, you don't say, oh, well, that's not a Guru, you don't respect it. You still respect the Gotka Sahib, right? But this will philosophically take out power from a lot of people claiming to house Guru Granth Sahib Swarups, and it will also instantly turn maybe like 99% of Gurdwara into Dharamsals, because they don't have a Guru Granth Sahib Swarup there. You can only have a Gurdwara if the Guru is present in the Sargun form there. So if you don't have a Sargun Swarup of the Guru Granth Sahib, it can't be classed as a Gurdwara. So again, it's another way we can philosophically really radically shift how we view Sikh spaces. So if you don't have the minimum standards, you're not a Gurdwara, you're a Dharamsal at best. All right, and then so again, you can read this in a bit more detail. There's some cautions here as well, etc., etc. But this is what the Sikh Spaces project is all about. And then I'll quickly go through the last couple of spaces. I won't go into too much depth because I want to encourage you guys to read it for yourselves. Is Bungas. So obviously Bunga Azaadi is one in a digital kind of space, but there's no reason why we can't have physical spaces, essentially Sikh education centres. And these can also be parts of existing structures, so it's not like these are all exclusive to each other. Like a Bunga can exist in a Dharamsal, or a Gurdwara can have 2 or 3 Bunga, etc., etc. And a Kara is a space for Sikh space for learning the art of combat. I think they should also expand the definition of such a thing to also include things not just gyms and martial art academies, which are brilliant in themselves, but things like shooting ranges, gun clubs, hunting lodges. This should also be classified as an Akara Sikh space. Again, similar to a Bunga, you can have this as part of another Sikh space too. There's more like a component than it can also be a standalone thing as well. And then maybe the last one here I'll discuss before we conclude this section is a Takht. So we have this kind of thing in our heads that, we have this Panj Takht, and that's kind of our sort of like Sikh political centre. But in reality, they're dysfunctional. They're not serving any really real political function. Especially for the diaspora living outside of India. We really need Sikh political buildings, embassies, like Khalsa embassies and meeting places for the Khalsa arranged as missiles, wherever we are in the world, right? We should split the world up in different regions based on the Sikh demand and Sikh need. And these Dakhs essentially should be, again, like embassies essentially, right? It should be the institution in another nation that basically acts as your liaison between the Sikh community that's residing in the nation and the government of that nation, right? So the Dakh should be responsible for lobbying practices, right, to get Sikh rights implemented. So things like maybe like greater gun rights and gun freedoms, for instance, right? Or the ability to, or even like wear bana and this kind of stuff. Like, it should be the Dakh, the political institutions of that nation, that conduct these kind of activities to ensure Sikh rights are protected. It should also then have funds to fight cases in court to protect the Sikh community, etc. It should be places of sanctuary for Sikhs who might want to escape to a Takht sort of thing if there's facing any sort of like oppression or anything like that. So these should be there shouldn't just be 5 Dakhs. There should be hundreds of Dakhs or thousands of Dakhs all around the world in various regions and areas. And obviously, it kind of like, in my opinion, it's more fitting something like this because we should understand a Dakht as wherever a Khalsa stands, wherever a Singh puts their foot, that is a Dakht really. Whereas we shouldn't have these kind of 5 political centres, these single points of failure, and then they become corrupted over time or dysfunctional, and then we're all sort of like looking around like, oh, where are the leaders in the band, that kind of stuff. It's just a ridiculous system to begin with. So let's start with, no, a Dakht now is a political building for the Khalsa, for the operating bases, these kind of things. These are serving some political purpose in towards advancing the cause of Khalsa Raj in some way, shape, or form, and supporting the Sikh Sangat of the regions that they're located in. These are the premier institutions for political ambition for Khalsa. So yeah, these are the different types of Sikh spaces, and I want to encourage everybody to contribute this in the following ways. So each space, types of space, will have 3 sections: a philosophy section, a component section, and a template section. The philosophy section is basically outline, okay, what exactly is a Shoni, right? So obviously we've inseminated some of these ones already for each one of them. What we need now is basically components. Okay, so what different aspects of a Shoni would you expect for us in a Sikh space, right? Like, would you have this thing? Would you have that organic farm? Or would you have, how would you run the stable? That sort of thing. We should have this, we should have that, etc., right? But the most important one probably is this templates. And the idea behind this is basically is how do you incorporate all these different components into forming a fully fledged, multifaceted kind of plan for how you set up a Shoni? What are the costs involved, etc., etc. Essentially forming a kind of quote unquote business plan for the space. So that Sangat anywhere in the world can learn from the case studies of others who are also attempting similar things in different areas, and they can take the lessons from here and adapt them for their own purposes when they want to set up their own Sikh space, so they can learn off each other, that kind of thing. So this kind of space, hopefully in time, will grow into a repository of information and wisdom for anybody wanting to set up their own Sikh space, especially alternatives to Gurdwara, because we have too much Gurdwara, we need far more other things now too. So yeah, that's basically in a nutshell the Sikh Spaces project. And if you do want to contribute, get in touch via email, which I've got listed here, or via Instagram, although I might reply late on Instagram because of the sheer volume and stuff we get. It takes me ages. Email's probably better. And you can find this at bungaazadi.com. Again, I'll post it on the stories or something, the link, etc., as well on Instagram. Or just reach out and ask me, and I'll send you the link directly. But yeah, that's pretty much the Sikh Spaces project. What we're going to do next is, so if you've got any questions about this, we'll cover it at the end. But yeah, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to hand it over to Bharpur Singh from Sikh Journal, who's going to do a presentation on Biadbi prevention, which kind of like runs into this now too. So Bharpur Singh, are you on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hanji, I can hear you. Can the YouTube chat guys, can you guys tell me if you can hear Bharpur Singh as well, please? Okay, let me just get your slides up quickly. Okay, cool. I think we might be good to go. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So like hello to everybody. Thank you for Ranjit Singh for the opportunity to talk about this important issue, and thank you for sharing the ideas that you talked about early on. That's really important.
Okay. I'll give me 1 second before saying it. There, everyone's saying you're kind of quiet. Let me try and increase your volume somehow. Let me see.
I think the slides are kind of cutting off on the borders. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, that's just me sizing it. I'll resize it in a second. Let me just quickly check the voice settings. Okay. All right, we're very quiet apparently. Let me see. Okay, are you able to turn up your volume on your side?
I can talk louder, I guess.
All right. Okay, that might work now. I've just turned up to 200% on my side. Okay. Let's try now. Oh, actually, hold on. I know what the issue is. Give me a second. Everyone, bear with. It's a bit of a. Still getting used to this kind of stuff. Hold on. Discord. I just need to. Then okay, I need to find you now on the. Okay, here it is. Okay, now say Fateh or something.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ.
Okay, that should be better now. So let us know in the chat if that's better. It's a bit of a delay, so I'm gonna wait a second, and then hopefully they'll tell us.
Okay.
Alright, I guess let's just start, and then if they start complaining again, then we'll sort it out again. But let's do it. Oh, they said much better.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
cool. Okay, you're good to go then. People saying let's start.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about behavior prevention, and especially for sharing the ideas that you talked about early on. I think there was really a need to really have open-minded conversations and let creative ideas come forward. So thank you so much for sharing the thoughts that you shared with us early on. Okay, so this is just going to be like it's the first time presentation on this topic in a presentation format, so it might not be optimized, but I try to make it somewhat logical and sequential. So we'll get into it right now. So next slide. So the objectives are going to be basically it's sort of what I was aiming at is like just give an example of the problem solving process that was kind of used in the ideas presented here, and then also how thinking about this problem, we can see that there are other problems that, although seem complicated, they actually can be broken down in a similar pattern here, just like BLB. And then lastly, the goal here is not really to like convince you to do this seva. It's more like you should find what's best seva that you could contribute with, right? So this is the end goal is like if you hear out this presentation at the end, you're like, there's another seva I want to do. That's going to be a positive outcome of this presentation. Of course, it will be great if you also want to help out with this one. Okay, so next thing we're going to go into the question that we have for everybody. It's kind of just like to bring our focus onto one of this. What's the one sheer thing that every single Sikh in the world does as part of their Sikhi experience? So I'll just wait like, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds to see if you guys can guess it. It's really straightforward, simple answer, and you do it as well. When you find out the answer, you're gonna be like, "Oh my god, I do it all the time." Yes, it's good to breathe. All right, gonna have a countdown.
Yeah.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, we've got
And here's
saying fake spirituality, which I guess a lot do.
well, the countdown is over, and that's not the answer we are hoping for. So yeah, on the next slide, we're gonna read the answer. Is the slide up? Oh yeah, okay. So that's Mathadik to Guru Granth Sahib. Like everybody does it. It does not matter. Like if you're like a young Pachangi, you don't have idea about a lot of things. You just because your parent told you, right? You do it. Doesn't matter if you understand Guru Bani, but you're in the family, you still do it, right? Then of course you be just doing Mathadik as in like Maharaj, like my everything belongs to you, right? So this doesn't matter what stage you're in. This is one thing that everybody does as a Sikh. So in a sense, it's the most common experience in our daily life as Sikhs that kind of defines us. It's like a one gesture that's it kind of unites everybody, right? So now it really shows like how central Guru Granth Sahib Ji is to all of us, regardless of how close we are to Gurbani or in a rat, like whatever your journey is, whatever your stage is, this is the one common thing that you have, right? So next slide, we're going to look into like how it really defines not just our experience as Sikhs, but everything literally depends on Guru Granth Sahib, right? So, for example, even our names originate from Hukamnama of Guru Granth Sahib. Now, I don't have any statistics on this, but I think most likely people do follow the process of getting the first word from Hukamnama, right? Then, just because you come in and sit in the presence of Guru Granth Sahib, you get the state, like, in the sense like you are considered Sangat. Like you might be like not even thinking about um, Gurbani or not even be like focused, right? You could be like stressed out about something, but you're still there. Just because you're there, other people are gonna be expecting you as a Sangat, right? You become part of that, right? And then while you're there, just because you're in the presence of Guru Granth Sahib, you're Jode in the Jodakar. Somebody's gonna be like, I wanna clean those your shoes, your Jode, right? Just because you're simply sitting, right? You may be absent minded, but just because you're in presence of Granth Sahib, all this happens,
Mm.
right? We have Nishan Sahib, right? Nishan Sahib is there to represent Guru Granth Sahib, right? Now, of course, there are, for example, the Gurdwara as well, that are historical, right? But we're talking about most Gurdwaras that we go into, like in the West, right? And in fact, the Gurdwara itself, like kind of as Manjeet Singh talked about earlier as well, like the whole building is built, the fundraising, everything is done because if somebody says we're gonna build a Gurdwara, saying we need to collect funds, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows there's underlying implied thing that's going to be Prakash of Guru Granth Sahib, right?
Mm.
If that fact was not there, you don't get the funding, right?
Yeah.
So even the whole structure, building, everything is because of Guru Granth Sahib. And if you're another Kirtan, it's because of Guru Granth Sahib's presence, right?
Yeah.
In fact, even Nanda Karj, all everything, even Amar Sanchar happens because of Guru Granth Sahib. So in a sense, we can all agree on this common, reality that Guru Granth Sahib is so central to our identity, right? So in the next slide, kind of like put in a simple terms, right? That Guru Granth Sahib Ji is the epicenter of identity. Like everything that we do as a Sikhs today is really kind of defined by Granth Sahib, right? So in the next slide, we're gonna it's kind of focusing on further, which is like since everything of significance to Sikh community traces back to the Guru, right?
Yeah.
Our well-being and success as Sikhs also depends on a relationship with the Guru Granth Sahib, right? And then kind of that's why like if our personal relationship is dysfunctional, like the most common the gesture that we do is matadik, right? It just defines everything. If that's dysfunctional, right? Because we don't build that relationship, we something goes kind of wrong, and like we like ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਮੱਥਾ ਟੇਕਦੇ ਆ, I don't you don't go to the office and do ਮੱਥਾ ਟੇਕ to somebody, right?
Mm.
See, so it's only to the guru side that you do it, right? So you're kind of saying, that I'm devoted to Guru Granth Sahib, right? So all aspects of the Panth are gonna get affected as well if our most fundamental relationship is altered, right?
Sure.
So the next slide, we kind of it's kind of the question, right? I know if somebody wants in the chat wants to answer that, but like, what is the current state of the Panth? So there are some examples like, are we united, divided, supporting each other, taking each other apart? We kind of united, cohesive,
Mm.
together, scattered, we collaborate a lot, or maybe it's fighting. Kind of we, is that what we enjoy? Uh, kind of have like we self-respect, or kind of just like turban pagalan de adana.
Yeah.
So that's the question, right? Yeah. What do you guys think? I think it's kind of like a rhetorical question. Kind of already know the answer, but just like like what is the state of our funds right now?
Mm.
Let's hear out. Maybe somebody thinks like we are super collaborative. We don't never fight.
Yeah, yeah. One
So
person just said mix of everything, which is I guess is right as well. There is a mix. Like some areas do things quite well, and a lot of areas don't. So there is a mix. You're right.
yeah. But if we kind of take the reference as like as a community, we everything that Maharaj gave us, right? If we take that as a reference,
Mm.
even though whatever we're doing, there are things that are going well, but they're not optimized as much.
Mm.
They should have been because of all this advantages that we have gotten, and especially they're unique to Sikhi, right?
Yeah.
So, so it's kind of, I mean, everybody has their kind of own perspective, but sort of one thing we can agree on is like we're not like united, and everything is not perfect, right?
Mm.
So now we're going to the next slide, and I just want to like ask you guys to just take a moment and then just feel what you see in the image. what is sort of representing.
Hmm.
Take a moment and like if we do Mathare the Guru Granth Sahib, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
what is this image saying? Right?
Yeah.
So wh- so if we have problems now in the funds, right? So and the video Mathare Guru Granth Sahib is so central to our identity, our existence. It's everything is Gurdwara, Narki, every single all the ceremonies that we have, every single thing is defined by Granth Sahib.
Yeah.
But then this is the reality, right?
Hmm.
What does it really say, right?
Exactly.
So the next
Exactly.
slide, we're gonna put in perspective that it's not just what you see there. It's that everything one act of Vyadbi is not just that. It's 10 times
Hmm.
because it's the Jagdi Jot of 10 Guru Granth Sahib, Vaheguru, 10 Guru Sahib Ji in Guru Granth Sahib, right? So if you look at the concepts of that's so clear in Sikhi, right? One act of Beadbi, we can't just say, okay, Beadbi ho, it's not Beadbi, it's 10 times, it's worse for us, right? That we let it happen. So next slide, what we really kind of see that this is what we kind of letting happen. And this is our Isht, right? Jagdi Jod, we say Rajan Ke Raja, right? Ten Guru Sahib, this is literally what's happening to our Guru Sahib. So it really kind of raises the question, right? Like, how is that if this is the current state, right? So in the next slide, how is that we can thrive as a plant, like if we can't even prevent Beadbi?
Yeah.
So in a sense, this is the point where we shift the the perspective from seeing it's as an act that you hear on the news, it's happening somewhere else, and it's like something that happened that's detached from us. But the reality is that w- weren't we're supposed to prevent it, right?
Hmm.
If that's sort of we have so much importance to given to Guru Granth Sahib, isn't it our responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen in the first place?
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the reasons why I personally have been kind of frustrated by all the conversations about like uh insaf jaida we we need justice. I
Yeah.
think and for me it's kind of already too late,
Yeah.
right? Yes, you might participate in that process, but it's like afterwards, like aftermath of something that at that point we already failed, right?
Yeah.
So that the question is, so the question is not the issue of BRB, it's the prevention of BRB. So
100%.
we have to shift into that. We have to shift because our pandemic failure is the moment it happens. Everything else is maybe we want to set an example, deterrence, all those things, but even deterrence in that case
Hmm.
it's not like oh ਇੱਕ ਸਰੂਪ ਦੀ ਬੇਅਦਬੀ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਲੋ ਅਗਲੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ no it's still a failure ਸਾਡੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਭਾਰ ਪੈਣਾ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਨਾ
Yeah. Yeah.
so in a sense if we can't even prevent it how can we expect our fund to thrive in anything, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why for decades it's
Yeah.
been going on for decades.
Yeah. This.
Swoops have been burned down, torn to pieces. So in a sense this is the crisis that we're letting happen because we are not preventing it, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense the question then is kind of in a sense at least this is what I think personally I feel like do we deserve to thrive because we just you know can prevent Beadbi, right?
Yeah.
So I think so kind of our argument is therefore we should take responsibility and make Beadbi a really important priority for the fund, right? So in the next slide we're gonna kind of now really get into some of the steps to
Yeah, just
solve sort
before
of this
just before we
problem.
go on the next slide, I just want to highlight some of the point you just made here about the whole idea that we as a band are extremely reactive rather than proactive, and it's a
Hmm.
very telling of like where our priorities lie with a lot of this sort of stuff. Like if it's like a remembrance march for like 1984 and stuff, whatever, obviously important 100%. But again, we're just reacting after the fact. Like where is the effort being put in to prevent another 1984 happening, to prevent another BRB happening, right? And there you have very, very few sanghas, very, very short amount of attention for that kind of stuff, right? But the attention is
Hmm.
very high, especially on social media when everyone's crying about, oh, this happened for about a week, and then they just forget and wait for the next problem to come around. We've formed this really bad habit as a band of becoming this really reactionary type thinking kind of people. Where you're exactly right. Do we even deserve the gifts of the guru if we're not even appreciating the guru? A lot of this goes down to simply just gratitude at the most fundamental level, and understanding, okay, where is the priorities and where should we devote our resources and effort. And this is why I put security in that Sikh spaces thing, but my minimum standards for a Godwara. So I put security first, is because unless you have the security side sorted and down, you don't deserve to have a Godwara unless you have it secure first. Everything else is secondary to that. That's how important the security side is, and it's shocking why we don't prioritize it more. Considering we're a band of warriors, supposedly, security should be our thing.
Yeah, and also like we like all our history is like of us, all these Sakya and like the historical acts that we hear about so much with courage, right? And then we come to this point where today we just are passive about this. And I'll go back to like when the Burgadi incident happened. That's kind of personally like I really got hit by this reality. And at that point, I used to like a page online or like a separate page. Was like like a few thousand followers at that point, kind of enormous. At that point, I would post these kind of updates about what's going on. I mean, there'd be photos of all those routes that kind of burned and images, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, at that point, because the page was more like an updates on what's going on. I was like, you know what? I mean, I had this image in my head, like, oh, like a Sikh Urdu Savere is like having chow, just like flipping pages of Kabar, and and the 60s like on the second half of the page, like a news news update on the Biadbi incident, and I felt like it would never come to a day for like a Sikh kade oh majala page part jive te kade utte ruke na hana.
Yeah.
And that's what I had in mind, like my kind of like my worst case scenario was that, like the reference. But then when time went on, it wasn't like it was not given enough press. That sometimes it wasn't even considered newsworthy.
Yeah.
So that's what, like, at that point I was like really hit. Like, what the hell? Like when you're like have a, let's say in any like a news organization, right? And in like a journalist, not even news channels, they sit in this room called like a news newsroom. They discuss like what is newsworthy. Like, hey, I'm gonna present my story and see like if it's worthy of being published in our outlet, right?
Yeah.
It came to time. It's such a bad state that it wasn't even considered newsworthy. And since then, so many incidents have been happening.
100%.
I was like, just something is wrong. At that point, my head was like, it's something fundamentally wrong with how we kind of go about things. But that was just like a my starting point of like going down rabbit hole of a lot of other things. So yeah, this is like a personal kind of note on
It's really good. It's really good you mentioned that, because I resonate with it deeply, because I come across a lot of the like Khalistani or neo-Khalistani pages on the Instagram or whatever, right? And they're all just like carbon copies of each other. They're literally just posting the same things over and over again. Like, it's like, yeah, but what value are you adding here? Like, only like now recently I'm seeing some kind of things where they're thinking a bit forward and proactively. But a lot of it is just reporting like the news that you're mentioning, right? Or we're victims in this way now, we're victims in that way now. It's like we don't need like 1,000 different Instagram channels to report the same sort of things over and over again. And this happened to us and this happened to us. Like, there's plenty of that. Like, let's start thinking about, okay, forward, like how do we prevent these things from happening, that kind of stuff. Like, it's a whole shift in mindset we need. But people love that kind of stuff. I don't think they love it. It's like this weird obsession with being a victim. And I don't know what it is. It's kind of like a weird mania going on. But you're completely right as well. Like, at a certain point, a lot of this stuff that should be shocking to our brains has become normalized. And then I mentioned earlier, we forget about it after a week. It's like, it's quite literally the case. Like, a massive biadbi might happen, and then a max maybe like 2 week attention span we give it, and then everyone sort of just forgets about it. And it's like, well, what was?
And that's only for some incidents. Like, it's a random thing. Like, somehow it becomes trending on Instagram for a week.
Yeah.
Most incidents do not get that sort of attention at all. Like,
yeah, you're right.
just ignore it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of situation we are right now,
yeah, exactly.
in the middle of.
Yeah.
And one more point I want to add on onto that is that I think personally, like as every I think on average, like we kind of look at whatever is going on in the fund. What I felt was like that we talk about all these struggles that we have in the fund, and then even in like the history, like in '84, like BRB was such a central point, right? It's played like a huge role in bringing a shift.
Mm.
And I think there's a little research that needs to be done in here, on this topic. But I think I did hear like a speech, like where you hear like this is it's about transitioning from peaceful to non-peaceful morcha, right?
Mm.
And the journalist was talking about the BRB in that case. So that kind of made me wonder, like how like he's literally talking about like a whole shift from non it was like what else do you need, like your east has been burned down, like Urgi Chaida, right?
Mm.
So that made me think about like, are we really looking at that history in like in a fair way, where like something that's so central to a Gursik, the Beadbi has really not been talked about even today, like everything that has been the groundwork of historical that kind of gives the foundation. So everything that's being talked about online to even today,
Mm.
we neglect, we've taken this part out.
Mm.
So I'm not saying it's everybody ignores it, but
Yeah.
in 10 posts you never see in those 10 posts one thing that's talked about Yadri, right?
Yeah.
So I think it is really unfortunate situation that we're in right now.
Yeah.
um yeah. So hopefully the next slide, the problem solving process is kind of puts some perspective to this, like how we can approach this.
Yeah.
So if you could go to that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so first we identify the problem, right? So the next step could be like we really need to get a better understanding of like kind of digging deep underneath the problem. So it's kind of what we talked about already. Like, how is that this can even happen, right? This sort of situation in this case is Vyadbi, right? Like, why is the situation so bad that as a general member of the sangha, right? Like it comes to a point where I have to like really stress out about it, because in an ideal situation you have like a proper structures that deal with the respond to important problems, and especially Bhagavad, right? It did not happen, and there were sometimes I would just sit and wait, like kuch boluga kuch kal hogi. There was just like this silence, right? um, and then it's like, and again, this is something that you might want to consider thinking about other problems that you resonate with, not just Beyond but anything else as well.
Mm.
So, like, why is this something that maybe something else that you feel is important, but somehow is neglected in the past, right? So, really have to dig deep in the question, right?
Yeah.
So, in my case, like in the next slide, like, and I was like wondering, like, what is the underlying reason, like, our mind is in the state that it is in, right? So the next kind of the thought process was like, okay, in a Sikhi, right, we do believe in karma, right? And if some किसी दिन तक खज्जल खुआरी हुई जावे, right, we do to try to do something. We have in a punch, for example, like we have skills, we have resources. It's not that साढ़े को कुछ भी नहीं है, right? We have all these things that we need to so many to be like so productive, but
Mm.
somehow it's still not happening.
Yeah.
So if we reduce that to our individual levels, right? So for example, like everybody who in a punch, right? We come to this world with our own personal karma. Like everybody's seva that you're gonna do, how much gurbani you're gonna read, like everything is tied to you as individual building block of the whole punch, right?
Mm.
So you have your own karma and that, but as a collective, our shared karma put together in a one bucket, it sets, I think, sort of the trend as a generation, like what we're gonna be able to do, what we are not gonna be able to do. So we really need to bring down to that level, right? That
Yeah.
we have come here with our own opportunity to save up, and while we may get the clarity to desire, even desire is a bakshish, right? So we get a desire to do seva to solve one problem, then why is that we cannot solve it? Because the reason is because everybody's collective karma is put together, and it's not just what we come with, but as what is that we let happen, right? So all these beatitudes that have been happening, they're piling up as a karma on all of us together as a month.
Mm.
So of course, if we try to solve the problem like that, we're gonna go against that sort of roadblock. And one thing we do know is that in Sikhi, like if you try to do seva, it's not like you're doing any favor to anybody. It's more like you do seva, you're gonna gain more than what you put out.
Yeah,
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵੱਧ ਮਿਲਣਾ. So in a sense, is the whole the you think about doing a seva and actually doing a seva is a bakshish, is a process of bakshish that's happening right there.
yeah,
So if we are not, it's like if you want to solve a problem, we need to convince Guru Sahib to let us, like give us the opportunity to do it. And first thing we need to do is apologize. Like maafi mangni chahiye sanu, na?
yeah,
So that's how we unlock this process where we are facing so much baggage that we just cannot be like, okay, chalo bhi Maharaja kar le aapa, we solve the problem now, we get in exchange the bakshish. Because Maharaj is not going to be like, acha seva kitiya, okay, and you're going to get nothing, right?
yeah,
So Maharaj is disproportionate because it's going to give you a lot more than what you put in.
mm,
So you really have to kind of, I think, convince Maharaj by first admitting your mistake.
yeah,
And I think that is what unlocks this it disconnects you from this karma's baggage, because that gesture alone, I think, in the state where we're right now in, it is what I think maybe is kind of maybe hopefully convinces Maharaj to say, you know what, I'm not gonna do it bakshish, so that this particular Sikh who wants to do certain seva, could be BRB or anything else as well,
sure,
like I'm gonna do enough kirpa so that the other does not stop us from, like, going ahead and solving problem.
yeah.
It's kind of like I think kind of difficult that's how we explain it, but hopefully we
No, no,
kind of get the point.
this,
You really have to
this,
apologize to a group.
yeah, 100%. I mean, this karma angle you've brought in is really critical, I think, because I think people sort of like mistake karma for like this kind of like magical kind of revenge system, but it's really like one example I was given like a very long time ago to understand karma was karma is simply if you put your foot in a puddle it gets wet. Like it's kind of like an action reaction sort of thing, like a cause and effect sort of thing. So it's like it's almost predictable. Like if we're going to permeate the world with suroops of Guru Granth Sahib, like have so many of them and just like keep pumping them out, and then we don't also scale that with the security infrastructure, well then of course you're going to get lots and lots of incidents of Yadbi, especially with a band that is so ingrained in political action and political change. It's going to rub certain communities, certain organizations, institutions the wrong way, and then those institutions are going to want to fight back. And then if we don't have the correct security infrastructure in order to defend our own institutions and our own spaces and our own guru, then what do you think is going to happen, right? It's like it's like
Mhm.
it's predictable almost, right? So it's all cause and effect. So if we're going to expand the amount of solutions that we have, but not expand the security infrastructure with it, then don't be surprised when we then have security breaches, which we obviously interpreting as Biadbi in this instance. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's a very important angle to have this karma brought into the conversation as well.
Because it's because my question was like, why is this reason? Like, even if you try so hard, things don't work out. Like, what is the reason? Maybe there's another answer. There's another, like, maybe there's an actual answer. I don't know. But
Mm.
this is one thing that helps me kind of, at least personally, make sense. Like, and it kind of is kind of rooted in the concepts that we have in the Sikhi, right?
Mm.
So, so in the next slide, like you see, like it's an image of the BRB again, right? It's that's our karma, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because who is supposed to protect our Guru Sahib, right?
yeah.
In fact, if you look at our history, like we used to protect other people, and
Mm.
now it's time that we have come to this stage. In a sense, it reflects the reality as well. I think that the security capability that you're talking about, right?
Mm.
That we don't have those, and it's because we have degraded so much that ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਚਾ ਪਾ ਰਹੇ,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So it's somehow it just kind of puts this issue beyond any logistical challenges. It doesn't matter what obstacle might be there. This issue becomes really like a defining, like it does not really define everything, but it does become representative of everything, our history, our all the acts that we did in the history. Like it has come to down to this. It's a challenge. Like if ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ solve ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ, personally I think it's maybe it's not going to be possible to solve anything else,
Yeah.
right? Again, that's like a more of like a personal biased opinion,
Sure.
but that's what I think, right? Karma is a roadblock that we have because we have let all these things happen. So
Yeah.
if we go to next slide,
Yeah.
that last image just sort of represents we divided, we are tearing each other apart, we are scattered, we are fighting, and of course, as you have is snooning,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sambia,
Yeah.
so come off. It's I'm not saying it is like a cause and effect, like like a really like a super logical sense, but
Mm.
it is somehow interconnected, right?
Yeah.
Because y- it's the same Sikh that doesn't respect another Sikh at the star. So the problem is underlying problem is respecting, right?
Mm.
So of course there's the same respect carryovers to Granth Sahib. Now, if usually the Sikhs who respect Guru Sahib Ji more than average are also tend to respect the Sar as more than other as well, right?
Mm.
So in a sense, it's kind of interconnected, right? So that's how it's a complex process,
Yeah.
but it is somehow intertwined, right?
Yeah.
Um, so so that's how we can see like the Beadmi is in a sense is kind of open up the gateway to the other problems because if we like how is that we can let something so crucial to other ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਮੱਥਾ ਟੇਕਦੇ ਆ ਆਨੰਦ ਕਾਰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਏਦਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਰਾਈਟ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਛਕਿਆ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨਾ ਹਨਾ ਹਜ਼ੂਰੀ ਚ ਛਕਿਆ
Mm.
right? So it just represents the state of the plant, right?
Yeah.
So now we're gonna go into the third step of the problem solving process. So now reflect about whatever you have been gaining and better understanding on. So now it's like okay, usually if you're passionate about an issue, it resonates with you. You wanna probably take responsibility, not as in doing something. This is more about you feeling that okay, you know what, I feel responsible for this and maybe I need to do more,
Mm.
right? I need to start thinking about it more. That's what I mean by taking responsibility. Even just giving your attention to a certain problem in a sense is taking responsibility, right? So in this case, if you consciously decide like hey, I want to consciously put my mental effort in understanding this problem, you're sort of taking responsibility. But there's a problem, which is you know you want to make sure that you don't go by the social media, whatever is out there, because at the end of the day, you have to set everything aside and ask yourself, like, what does this problem mean in my personal relationship with my guru, right? You
Mm.
better bring it down to that the most authentic thing that you have, because your relation does not should not be really influenced by what you see. Maybe your friend circle talk about a lot. Because at the end of the day, Kogi, we have only so much lifetime, time left in this life. You want to make sure that whatever you decide, it's like you're going to find out, is this issue really something that my guru wants me to do,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe is this something else? So it's important to really like get down to it. So maybe this means like you go and do ardas, you know, you do some part and then do ardas again, right? So that's something that brings out authenticity in your choices because you're asking guru to tell you, to guide you. That's kind of also like giving guru status as a leader that kind of gonna lead you, right?
Yeah.
So, but if we don't ever ask Guru Sahib, like in normal like life, in our daily life, you need somebody's why you got to ask it, right? You have to communicate. In our case, we have to do the ardas, right? So I would urge like everybody to like I think it's everybody does it, so I'm sure of it. But still, I'm gonna highlight it that always do this versus anything that's externally influencing your choices.
Mm.
So the next slide, this is like a tool, also like a little bit practical, gonna help get some sort of clarity in this chaos, right? Which is looking at things in a two buckets. One is internal, one is external, right?
Yeah.
So for this sort of like a framework, the goal is like to figure out like to so that we can effectively serve Guru Sahib, right? We must first identify like what is Guru centric and really internal to the Pan, and then we separate from like everything that's kind of external, has to do with non-Sikhs, other dynamics, like something that other religions, other group of people are kind of involved in, right? So we really focus on what is already within our decision making versus what is not, right? So in a current crisis, like we're so confused and disoriented, right? Our priorities, that then there are often objectives that don't directly even serve a Guru Sahib Ji and have somehow become pantic, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like most crucial responsibility towards the Guru Sahib are like pretty much dismissed, right?
Mm.
So that's why going to the other point as well is like we really need to ask our Guru Sahib to help us out in decision. But this sort of model sort of helps also. our decision making as well. So in the next slide, we're gonna put in attributes of these two realities that we might want to figure out which one to go with. So internal one is something which is already within decision making capacity, which means that it's within our internal institutions, skills, and resources. Your Gurdwara has your own decision making, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there are some cases where we talk about external influences, but more or less, like this is relatively speaking, the most influence that we have and decision making that we have is within those spaces, right?
Mm.
Um, uh, and then in the resources that we have, oh, there's a double. I wrote the word two times, but hey, it's good because we really do
Abundance.
have resources that are underutilized. So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
that. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and the unique thing about looking at things internally is that it really shows that the limitations are only of dedication and hard work, our resources, and if we talk about financial resources, those resources can be also expanded, not by external, but we as a six can decide to expand those. Like it's up to us, right? And
Yeah.
especially, and that's the thing, right? And on the other side, external is the outcomes that really kind of depends on external and non-sig dynamics. Like there are some things that we involve in, but ultimate outcome has to do with all the external influences, relations that we have. So it's not really kind of up to us as six,
Yeah.
right? So there are different interests. Maybe they're clashing, maybe they're not. It just kind of all we can do is really like work hard, yes, but we can prepare for the best outcome, but it's not guaranteed. Just like we're hoping for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that could be like legislative change or something like that, right? And in internal, what is completely within our control is BLB prevention.
Hmm.
That's why this model is putting into perspective, and it shows that we don't need to go outside and say insaf and all those things because the point is we shouldn't have let it happen in the first place.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna look into like the next step.
Yeah, just before you go to the
Um,
next slide, I just want to make a quick comment on this, like about
yeah.
the idea of like there is an abundance of resources in this band. There's a lot of wealth in this band, and what we do lack, especially you're right, there's dedication, hard work, and I guess there's also ability to communicate solid plans for things, right? And give people a pathway and say, okay, well, if you put this much in, then this outcome will happen, sort of thing, right? Because
Yeah.
someone it's a great evidence that we have a lot of wealth in this band. It's like whenever like a Diljit the Science concert sort of happens, right? Then everybody wallets comes
Hmm.
out, right? Loads of money spent on that. But then how much money has been spent on active BRD prevention in comparison? Probably not even a fraction of that, right? So it's like it's just it just comes down to where are the priorities at, and how do we, as those Bantic-minded individuals, communicate the benefit of doing something in a way that captures the most minds in the sangha, that this is in your interest, right? That this is actually something, but we got to do that in a way where it's like you actually have to provide a solid plan of like this is if you put this in, this will happen, sort of thing, like a pipeline thing, right? But
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Diljit Dosanjh concert, it's quite clear what you're getting as a okay. You're putting in, give me your money, and I'll sing some songs to you, right, in a big stadium, whatever, right? So
Hmm.
it's quite clear. But it's like I think we as a band sometimes end up like abstract things a lot sometimes. So what we need to start doing, I guess, is really operationalizing things and giving things a solid. Okay, well, okay, look, we want to hire a full-time security detail for the Godot. It's going to cost this much. We're going to go with this company. These things are going to be working in it, etc., right? Then you have a kind of really bulletproof plan there to set up a security detail wherever for the Godwara.
Hmm.
I think we need more of this kind of thing because you're right. You're extremely right. There is so much resources, a lot of wealth, but I think we also need to be wary of is that we should stop pushing the wealth away, because a lot of time when some Sikhs get successful, then they started to they get demonized almost, and it's pretty ridiculous why we do that to like the successful people of the band. That oh, you don't have the band kind of thing. Whereas like, well, are you providing them with anything realistic or like practical in which to help the band in a way that's got the minimum friction? Like it has to go both sort of ways, and forming that relationship rather than just sort of like demonizing and getting like depressed and angry at everything. Because again, I have to say it for the third time or fourth time, we do have a lot of resources at band. It's just about how do we coordinate it and then consolidate it and then coordinate it.
And just adding on that point,
Yeah.
it's not just that sometimes we need a lot of resources. Sometimes it's we just need a bare minimum. It's
Mm.
more about effort and being resourceful, right?
Yeah.
And I'll share an example. Like there's like some of the things I got involved in. Like so far, we didn't even like raise a lot of public funding. It was just like maybe max $1,000. Like all this stuff that sharing everything. Like it was like a process, some practical experiments that we did and everything.
Mm.
It didn't cost that much. We didn't even go out like I raised like 10,000, 20,000, $100,000. Like,
Sure.
and then so I think it's just also about being resourceful and finding ways, but just believing that you can do it,
Mm.
and then just try to like just go with that premise that it is possible. You can do it. There's absolutely no obstacle to do it
Yeah.
if you have set your mind to, it, especially if you're asking your guru sahib to do it.
Yeah.
Only limitation is us, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's also about the mindset, right?
100%.
So
100%.
yeah. So and then in the next slide, we're gonna look at that step four, which is like once you have again, one of the things I want to clarify is that although we're not really talking about specific problem solving of BFB, this is building up to it because you're gonna see in a few slides like how exactly this makes it so easy, and just how we talked about resourcefulness that actually you don't even need a lot of funds to prevent BFB. So I'll get into that, but right now it's like evaluating your plan, evaluate and plan your commitment. So one of the things is more about being like being realistic, and also because of the mental health. So I think it's good to ask, like, do I actually have the capacity to take on this responsibility? Now, yes, if we read a history, we might be. I think it's a good thing as well. Like we feel like, everything could go all in, which I think we should. But we also have to look into right now. We don't have efficient infrastructure, which
Mm.
means if you're trying to do X, there's all the other factors that are not going to be synchronized, that you're going to have to sort of build everything from scratch, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think a lot of projects fail as well. So we really had to, like, at this point, at least in the current state of things, we really need to ask ourselves, like, I am I ready to take this responsibility? So this is a
Mm.
question. Second thing is like, can I manage it over a long term?
Mm.
Yeah, something we should ask ourselves. Then is like, is there a solution to manage my mental health in the current painful state of the fund? Because especially if you're following social media like most of us do,
Yeah.
there's always something happening that takes a toll on your emotions. And how are you going to keep up with? And this is something also in some of the projects I realize is that if volunteers are working on one thing, but then a wave comes of like something bad happens to the plant, everybody's impacted, they get hit by it. And I saw it happen multiple times. And then there's really no way, like, the people just feel helpless,
Mm.
right? And it just sometimes put in a stage where you have for your own mental sanity. Sometimes it's not even conscious. Your body reacts, and the mind reacts in a way that you just disconnect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So mental health is really important in that sense as well, especially because it if you manage it well, your long term output is much more than the short term peak output that you might have, right?
Yeah.
So the next slide,
So
there's like another tool.
just quickly before we go to the next slide, I think this slide is really important. What you've mentioned, some of the points here. I just want to highlight this mental health point. Obviously, like, yeah, people sort of like say it all the time, sort of thing, but it is important. Like, there's so much factors go into this as well. Because like, if you want to do anything like Bantic project related, like having your own sort of like quote unquote house in order is extremely important. Like, can you mentally handle what you're doing? Because people sort of jump into things and then they sort of like the reality sort of hits them and they get really like it gets really tough. So it's very important, this part of it, and I think Sangat is a good way to maintain and manage this aspect, and also healthy diets and exercising regularly, and having like outlets as
Mhm.
well that are not related to the project, like hobbies, that kind of stuff. It's really important. I think
Yeah.
I'm very glad you mentioned this part. I think it's extremely good, and especially when, like, yeah, you're right. When you go through social media, you're seeing constant kind of like depressing stuff. It is going to have to take a toll, especially on teams and stuff like that, and the psyche, etc. Another thing I wanted to mention before we move to the next slide was the second point mentioned about how can I manage it over the long term. So somebody in the chat just asked a question about should the security shifts be taken up by Shahzadi Sangat as Seva, and I was thinking like, yeah, like, ideally you'd want the Shahzadi like cars, say whatever in the area to come in and they'll do the like the Beradar Seva or whatever, right? Like for night shifts, etc. But it's like, if you're not paying people, if there's no economy for something, it is not sustainable. You're gonna have people coming in maybe for the first like couple of weeks, couple of months, and they'll do it out of the kind of like passion of it. But then they also have like families to look after and like ambitions they want to pursue, all that kind of stuff, right? And I think as a band, right, especially again with the resources we have, we shouldn't be having to rely on just doing everything for free because passion is good, but passion can also be temporary. And passion is also can be affected by things like the mental health stuff, life issues, family situations, right? If you can make something your full-time job where you're paid and paid well for things that are in the benefit to the band, that's the best thing. Like Maharaj didn't just expect his armies to fight for free. He also paid them,
Mhm.
paid them well, right? The Bari poets as well, give them land grants and all this kind of stuff, like little mansions to live in when they come to Anandpur. Like the whole like idea of the financial incentive, we seem to demonize it in modern culture, but it's so important because it's the finances, it's the economy of something that keeps something sustainable. So yes, yes, it should be seva, but I think we should expand the definition of seva in some sense, where it's not just doing things for free, but doing things in relation to what is the outcome of it, and assessing the outcome as seva rather than okay, what's going into it rather, right? So if someone's getting paid to guard the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup 24/7 like as a security team, that would, in my mind, that's still seva even though they're being paid sort of thing. And I think we should pay them and we should pay them well so we can create an economy for it and also an incentive to basically consider it as a viable career path. Because if people start growing up, right, like younger generation especially, and they start seeing, oh, I can go get a job defending the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup as a security job, doing risk assessment, setting up security systems, etc. That's a viable career path for me, and I can get paid well. I can look after my parents. I can sustain a little family doing that thing. Well, then we're going to automatically start getting a lot of young Sanghas wanting to get into those industries. So not only do you build that security infrastructure that I was mentioning earlier, you build the security competency and also the security industry serving the band, provided by the band sort of thing. So I think, yeah, we can't just rely on things for free. I think having an economy element is extremely crucial.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally on a point. And also, if you look at Gurdwara, one of the reasons they are like, it's one of the models that are sustainable, right?
Mm,
Because there is an economic system that somehow it kind of works out, right?
exactly.
We have like certain professions that are standardized in the band, although there are issues like they're not paid well enough. But the art forms, right? Right now we have ragis. They will get some financial payments, right? On the other side, if you look at some of the historical roles that we kind of don't have anymore, like
Mm,
the security aspects as well, is because that economy was never really built, right?
yeah.
But it is possible, right? If Ragis, can self-sustain, although like there's a big issue, like it's not enough, but it has been an example where that sort of thing can work out,
Mm,
and it does because it's up to the sangat. If the sangat gets realization that something is important, they can kick it off, and then it can, sometimes you just need like enough to give it the initial for kind of inertia to get it kind of spinning,
yeah.
and then it just starts becoming sustainable long term.
Mm,
So kind of to make it easier, like the next slide, like about the localized and distributed one, that's kind of another sort of tool for kind of guide our thinking in a little bit, right? So earlier we talked about mental health, right? So this is what gonna be helping manage that, right? And also to touch on that point earlier about the mental health, even though I am talking about this, like can I have, certainly have given some thought to it, right?
mm,
Even I guess sometimes get impacted by things I know, like certainly like that's not what I'm made to do that seva, or like that's not for me. It still impacts me. So it's
mm,
really strong to kind of really manage that. So this is what localized distributed sort of model is uh, to really like make things smaller. You don't have to feel responsible for everything that's out there. Just manage in a certain way. But in order to do that, you also need something to make sense out of, so that what you do fits into the bigger picture, right?
mm,
So I think right now it doesn't matter like how much passion, dedication, effort may have. You want to be willing to put for the fun. The current mode that we are in, like perpetual crisis, is like really demoralizing, right, and
mm,
debilitating. There's only so much you can do, right? There's only so much the sensation of being helpless that you can take, right? In such a state of society, right? How do you protect and nurture your potential and effectively contribute to the fund? So this
mm,
is not about just me about me or like some of the folks you're listening in, right? It's about every single six potential. Like how
yeah.
do we make it kind of nurture that and protect it, right?
Mm,
And in the next slide, like there's like a representation of like that's the band, and that's like you. It's like a rough representation. You
Yeah.
and your Sangha circle, your friends. It doesn't represent geographically, but like
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
connections. Maybe you do know one like person in another country, right? But that's your circle, right?
Hmm.
So the goal is with that model, you and your sangha, right? You know, in fact, in daily routine, responsibilities of life, time and resources are limited. You might have infinite passion. You might wanna like, in my case, like some point I just went all in at the cost of all the other things,
Hmm.
which I was hoping gonna build some inertia. But thing is, it caught up with me, and really I got hit where I was like not productive for a really long time, and
Hmm.
it becomes really difficult to like build a momentum up, right? So it's
Hmm.
important to just keep that practical reality in our perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the next slide. So this is the whole plan. That's what you have. That's what you have access to. That's what you're connected with. People know you. They know who you are. You know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So the next slide, the what this model kind of promotes is that make your local region your responsibility, right? Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like if it's something is happening 1,000 kilometers away from me, I don't know anybody who lives there. I don't have a number, or email anybody who lives there. I'm just
Hmm.
so detached from the ground reality that it's like even if I wanted to, it, I could just reach out and do it, but that detachment is that you're gonna be also detached from the feedback that you would otherwise get if you were working, let's say, on you something that's local. You
Hmm.
can really pick up on the, let's say, the nuances on the dynamics that are more visible when you're closer and you're operating in a circle that you kind of have more flexibility and it's familiar and all that, right?
Yeah.
Again, this is doesn't have to be what you do exactly, but it's something to kind of guide our mind, right? Let's
Hmm.
say, you know what, let's do this, and it also aligns with how usually if you want to kick start some things, it makes it more feasible. For
Yeah.
example, it's easier to operate in a local area. You have tracked outcomes closely. You can actually solve the global funding problems in your area right first, and then with that you gain experience and then help other regions. So that's
Hmm.
the key with this model. All the so now the things that we're talking about, even the spaces, the list that you had of all those items, if you think about those things, they're applicable to every region.
Yeah.
They are not. We're not at the stage where we're doing something. We just need like one thing. It's done for the fund.
Yeah.
We need all those things replicated in different for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So so right now, this model in the current stage is really relevant, I think.
I
So if
agree.
we
Yeah.
break up the problems in the local area, let's say your region, your city, your province, your state, right?
Hmm.
Whatever that is, it's easier to focus on that and to feel actually also responsibility for that because it's manageable rather
Hmm.
than something that's failing out there you just feel helpless about, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is really
So this
important.
is
This is
sort of
really good. This is really good because there's a couple of things I want to say about this. Is because like even like one thing is that you got this. There's a you, then your sangha, then your band, and then with the biggest circle is the band itself, right? And then you have a.
mhm.
I guess like you would even have like a even wider circle of like humanity as a whole. Like the band is a part of the humanity, right? But
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's a really I can't remember the exact kind of quote now, but the idea was essentially like I tried to save the world, but I really couldn't do it, so therefore I tried to save the country, and then I couldn't save the country or fix the country, so therefore I tried to save my city, couldn't do that. Then he tried to save his town, couldn't really do that, like or fix his town, right? And then he goes, then tried
Mhm,
to do fix my house, and then I couldn't really fix my house, and then like the situations, the problems, and then he tried to fix himself, and he did it. And that's the kind of like areas sphere of influence that you actually have is to work on yourself. And then once he started working on
mhm,
himself, then the house started to get better. Then the house started to get better. The street started getting better. The street got better. The neighborhood, the town, the city, the country, the world, kind of thing, right? It's like
mhm,
it cascades like that. And I think a lot of us need to sort of like appreciate that thing a bit more. I mean, especially like the Bunga as well. We get asked like a lot about what you guys gonna do about Punjab, right, and that kind of stuff. It's like we don't yet have the resource to do really much about it. Like, yeah, we can give theories and like offer like I guess like his policy planning, his how we'd go about it. But it's like really our sphere of influence is where we sort of are situated. And that's mostly the diaspora in the West kind of thing. That's the kind of systems we're more used to. That's the kind of like mode of operating we know how to we know can get the feedback, all this kind of stuff. And another example that came to mind was a lot of the times when like local Godwara politics seem to get spill out into like the wider mainstream. So I don't know, like a Godwara in one town. I don't know, maybe the Gandhi turns out to be a pedo or something, right? It's like, it's important for everyone to sort of like know that, but it's like everyone sort of jumps on the bandwagon and then tries to like get put their foot in it when really it should be the local sangha that sort of just handles it. And a lot of time the local sangha can handle it, but because of social media, because of the way technology is these days, things just get blown up far bigger than they should be. In terms of like the amount of attention something gets, because there's lots of problems going on, and really the
Yeah.
local sangha can just sort that out with the police, get it involved, and they can just squash it there. Because otherwise, when you keep like making such a big deal, it's not just our band is just looking at that. It's like other bands look at it and goes, "Oh, look at the Sikhs are pedos," that kind of stuff, right? So it's quite embarrassing for the
Yeah. Yeah.
reputation of Sikhs at that point as well. So yeah,
Especially if you look at the history, right? We used to
yeah,
the polar opposite.
yeah.
It's
Just
just-
we just need to sort things out a bit more on a local level and learn to not cry about things at such a large scale, and just handle things and move on, and create
Mhm.
sustainable systems, right? Like that. Okay, well, look, here's a problem and here's how we solved it. Instead of just sharing the problem, let's share the solution, how we fixed it. And therefore that help prevent this thing happening in the future. So yeah, if there's a pedo Yanni, okay, what do the local sangha do there to fix this problem so there's not going to be another pedo Yanni there ever again, kind of thing, right? Let's share that solution. Let's not just share, oh, there was a pedo Yanni. Cause, okay, fine, like, yeah, there was a pedo Yanni. You're just telling me the problem. What did you do to solve it? Like, the solution bit's the best bit. And also the how do you prevent it happening in my local area. But social media is not like that. Social media seems to be just about crying about problems over and over again, and not solving anything, and then waiting for the next problem to arise, and then get outraged again.
Yeah. And I think that people look for like one big checkbox and they say that, okay, check, it's
Yeah,
done for everybody.
that's
Like,
it. That's
no,
it.
it's like maybe one region is like ahead of on one thing, but they're lagging on another one.
Mm,
That's why, like, the reason, like, this is like a simple model. There's nothing complex about it. It's like, it just makes it more realistic.
mm,
Like, okay, that thing happened in that region. Instead of saying, oh my God, like, just like how we react on social media, it becomes now like, okay, what it means for the punt is that in that specific region, they did not develop that capability.
yeah.
Now, question is there other region that has that capability? Yes. Okay, there are 10 of them. Okay, now let's find which one has done the best job at it.
Mm,
Okay, let's look them up and then have the local standard for that region where that incident happened be responsible for it,
yeah.
and then checking with them like, hey, do you guys follow up? Are you implementing what you need?
Yeah.
So it becomes simple, right?
Mm,
And then maybe something else happens in the same region that actually helped this region also this problem,
mm,
but the region that had the problem initially that this other region was helping them out with actually happens to be expert in solving their problem, so they just
yeah.
help out.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's like it builds a collaborative process. So or what we speak right now is like one big box, one problem solved, hogi nahi hui, that's it. But in fact, it's actually the practical reality. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
requires more. And I think it just I think build prem in the sangat as well. Like
Mm,
ਅਸੀਂ ਆ ਕੀਤਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਪਿਆਰ ਨਾਲ ਰਾਈਟ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੋ ਅੱਛਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆ ਹੈਲਪ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ ਚਲੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰੀਏ ਨਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੋ ਏਦਾਂ it just enables that process as well.
yeah. Yeah.
So I would like to like whoever is listening to like really just put in some context. If I hope this sort of helps to kind of whatever problem you are it really is affecting you, right? It
Mm,
helps to kind of manage it in that way, right?
yeah.
So so now you might have thought like the first step would have been like pick a problem and start solving it. This is, I think, the solving is this part comes before that. So
Mm,
now we're going to transition to actual problem solving. Sorry. So next slide we talk about like step 5. Start solving a problem. It kind of connects with what we just talked about. Hold on, maybe we don't need to solve the problem, right? Maybe there's an existing plan in another region, right? They have already
yeah.
done it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to solve the problem, you have to implement it, which is totally different than stressing out about solving a problem from scratch,
Yeah.
which
Very
is
different.
mostly what we do in
Yeah.
every region, every space, right? We're using silos.
Mm,
So we become efficient by using wisdom of other regions and provide new insights in my implementation. That's how we build up, like even in industries, right? The industries develop, They share insights. One does one thing, experiment. Even scientists, I did this thing, but this doesn't work out. Like somebody does same thing in a different way, it works out. Same thing.
Yeah.
So your problem now is not solving; it's implementing it. Then you have mentors, possibly they can reach out to. You can people can guide you, right? Now let's say so that's a good thing, right? But in that say it's a certain problem you don't have anybody you can find online, or there's like of course there's going to be system put in place to make facilitate this process down the line, but maybe it's something new you're going to do. What it means is that now you're going to be pioneering a new process in your region, but don't think as a solving a problem. We need to frame it as iterative process, because what this means is you're not going to succeed the first time. Like that's it's just like startup, right? Startup is different than something that's already well established.
Yeah.
You're going to have to, in this case, try fail. You have to already put in mind that failure is expected, it's part of the process. That way, on top of bringing down your sense of responsibility to your region only, you're also conditioning your mind to be okay with failure and seeing failure as a process in an iterative long-term goal to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And then if you are doing that in an organized system where we're going to be coordinating this, everybody else is going to know like, hey, this region did that, they accomplished this. So there's going to be certain sort of like respect to that region who solved a certain problem, right? So I think we also need that mutual respect, sharing, right? Just like other people became mentors to help your region to solve a problem that they had already solved. Now your region is gonna get to guide the fund to contribute to who knows how many regions to solve the same problem, right?
Yeah.
So this is how with the regional like distributed model, like we can approach problems, right?
Yeah.
So that's why like, I didn't really get into the solving BRB, do this and that. Maybe we can solve the BRB problem. It's not about, because right now you can apply the same process to any other problem,
Yeah.
and it somehow makes sense. And especially for those who might not be like, although we might want to see the problem being solved, but it's not something they feel like it's your seva to do for the punk, right? So yeah, so now we're gonna go into specifically how we're gonna solve the problem. That's gonna be like a pretty quick section, because the main part was the process of managing our okay.
It's really good actually
So
that you've
now
done this because if you get the foundations right, then the house will kind of like is solid. Like the house you build on top of the foundation. So it's like all this part before you even get to like solving the problem is very crucial. Like especially when you like tie the malla or something, right? You got to get the bunga underneath the bag you put underneath, kind of like the structure right of that kind of thing, and then you can build the malla on top, sort of thing. Like it should teach us that, like how, but even the star tying process, get the foundation right, tie the jewelry right, whatever right, and then you can build the star on top. And so what you've done here is like
yeah,
very similar to that. And just quickly as well before we move on is someone in the chat asked when it comes to starting new initiatives, a lot of goals overlap with other organizations with the same initiatives. Is there a directory of every single Bantic organization to be able to collab with? And apparently there's one called a seat directory in the UK that tries to achieve this. I think it's good actually to have something like this where we just list it all, or whoever's doing it is listing it all. So people then do understand, okay, well, are we duplicating effort? Has somebody already done it, or can we learn something? But I think also then the other risk is that we don't want to have this attitude, oh, well, they're already doing it, we can't do it, therefore. It's like, okay, well, they're doing it in this way. Can I do it in a different way that solves it better, kind of thing? Because we should retain this kind of like competitive, so long as it's good sportsmanship, we should have competitive atmosphere amongst ourselves rather than centralization where we put all our eggs in one basket with one institution, one organization, and expect them to solve everything. A bit like how I guess people like kind of have an attitude with the Agartha, and then it's like then it becomes dysfunctional. But where really, instead of centralization, I think obviously I'm biased, but I've always advocated for misalization, where instead of trying to think about solving problems in a way where we unite the whole band to get this kind of band to white ekta and then solve the problem. No, maybe the idea is actually form ekta with the kind of like like-minded individuals that you align with on a local level, form a missile, form a group, for some kind of like organization amongst yourselves, and then actually go out and attempt an experiment and try to solve the problem in the way that you guys think is best. And then your success, your result should speak for itself. If it wasn't a great idea, then it will fail, and then we will learn from that. If it was a great idea, then it will succeed, and we'll learn from that, right? So, like you mentioned, the startup kind of examples, because they've got this concept in the startup world called fail fast. And exactly because
Mm-hmm.
of this, because you want to iterate through experiments as fast as possible. We're going to fail as fast as possible because through failure you get the most sort of learning, and then with the new learning you get, that forms the foundation for a better experiment next time. So we should create a
Yeah.
band, right, where we have a safety net where people can try out various experiments, and if they don't work out, then it's not a big deal. But if you centralize everything and put all your eggs in one basket, and then if it doesn't work out, then it is a big deal because we're all the whole Panthers are relying on this one institution. But if we don't have, if we spread the risk out, diversify it, then we have a competitive environment where multiple jate, multiple missiles are approaching the same problem from different angles and trying to achieve that outcome. Then you get a very good kind of like testing set essentially to realize okay what works,
Hmm.
what doesn't, how can we learn off each other, etc., etc. So yeah, I really like this kind of idea of a startup kind of analogy.
Yeah, and then the problem is that with startup is like if the whole actual process happens, the failure doesn't help unless what you learn from failure is helping uh you start again, or maybe somebody just gives up, right? That's okay too sometimes, right?
Yeah,
But then it has to be made available to other people so they can pick up and learn from and don't make the same mistakes again.
yeah.
I think that's what sort of is lacking. And then there's like another kind of model that I'm going to be sharing at the end that
Mm.
sort of tries to solve this problem. Because right now I'm sure that a lot of people that attempt different things, but I have no idea like what they learn from those things. So you sort of have to always start to
Yeah,
start from scratch.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's what social media
Now,
for the bunch should be about as well, like sharing our failures and our solutions, that kind of stuff, rather than just self
yeah,
victimization over and over again. Maybe this is what we need for maybe a sick social media to be a space where we can
yeah,
experiment and then share our learnings.
yeah, yeah. So once we have clarity on this one, we can just take the example of the other. It's going to be so easy to find out, like figure out how to solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
So in the next slide, I'm talking about like first step of the BRB is we're going to break down just like we broke down the regions into smaller pieces. Even the problem of BRB, if you think about it, it so far has been always like BRB, and that's it. The one word. It's
Mm,
like it represents everything. Sometimes Darbar koi ladai ho jaye, that's BRB. Sarup no, unfortunately, like it's get burned down, or
mm,
like how they say short circuit ho gaya somehow, you know.
yeah.
It's still seen as the one word. So I think it just makes it overwhelming as well, and also does not give us clear perspective.
Mm,
So that's why its first step it has to be dividing it up in different categories, right? That's how we can effectively prevent it, and then do if it in if unfortunate cases where it does happen, we can do analysis, and then kind of going back to the other point that we discussed earlier, we're
mm,
gonna actually iterate on those measures that we put in place,
yeah.
and then if it still fails, we can improve those. So it facilitates that process where we gradually, our effort compounds, over time, right?
Yeah.
So um and then it's just like this way, like if you would go with the category option, your Sangat and your local pond can implement measures to first prevent one category. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do everything, right? Then continue with additional category one at a time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
really
once we
good.
put in the category,
Yeah.
hmm?
This is
Yeah.
really
So
good
once,
because it builds momentum, right? When you break up a problem into parts and then you solve the parts in order of like, okay, how much effort can you apply to it? And then if you're solving it off, you're ticking it off one at a time per category. Then you build the momentum, you build the skills, you build the experience, you build the kind of like even the mental health side of things, right? You get the boost. Oh yeah, we solved that kind of thing. Okay, what's the next kind of thing, right? If you're doing it all as one big effort, then obviously yeah, you're gonna get stressed. You ain't gonna achieve much,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And also the point about earlier about like really asking like, can you really do it is important. And especially that's why in the categories we have to put in them like, if you see on the slide, like low effort and high effort.
Mm,
Like if you want to solve this problem, let's say this is something you're strongly feeling about, but you just don't happen to have time, maybe right now, maybe just it's just this year, but you're gonna have more time in the future. Maybe you have more time right now, but gonna start work in like 6 months or something. So you
mm,
can put in that perspective and maybe start with disposable print.
mm.
So that's the BRB that happens. Like we have printing happening on like wedding cards and throwing cash trash cans,
Yeah.
newspapers. And in my case, I've been going to my local Gurdwara and like always kind of sometimes you look into like a trash cans to see like if they found some akbara and it's like some photos in the trash can,
Wow.
and it just yeah. There's one time actually it wasn't trash can, but like there's like yeah, that next one, the Agan paid BRB, right?
Yeah.
this was like I think like a pivotal moment for me as well, which was like I had some kind of doubts going on, like kind of because like why, and I'm like looking at things a certain way, like am I wrong or something? At that
Mm.
point, what happened is like somebody called me to like help out with something. It turned out they were doing organ pate of like stuff that they didn't need,
Mm.
and I found like entire sundar gutka, like really like it. Sometimes have gutka with like some finger oil, everything like a pages get dark, like the
Mm.
yellow. This was like perfectly like white.
Yeah.
The only thing was yellow the Sikhi kind of like, and it was like they were already like putting in the fire, which is like waiting like a next batch of things on throw, and then I found it. I was like,
Mm.
what the hell?
Mm.
Like, so now the Bellaby is not like it's just that other people do it. I think aap kar rahe hain, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's it's like I don't pay the Bellaby, right?
Mm.
And then it was like other pothis that I found as like Keetan Wali pothi, so that was like an eye-opening experience. But the thing is, like, you see, like here the outcome, let's say of a pothi is the same, it gets burned, right? But Agnapit Bellaby is more on the low effort side
Yeah.
because you need. Touch more in the next slide. Is like you don't need a lot of effort to prevent it, right?
Mm.
Then the next one is neglect. Sometimes just things are neglected. I think if you have followed some of the bands that happen in Punjab, some were just neglected.
Yeah.
Like Sarupya, there's no care of it, and it's a mitti pa ye sara kuch, right?
Yeah.
Then we get into more like tricky ones, like textual. Like this is like printing गलत हो जाती है, right?
Yeah.
Intentionally करना कितना है ना?
Yeah.
It's more like it's not about you can. It's no such thing as preventing it. You have to like it goes before it's even printed. So
Yeah.
that's like before something that can be done BRB of doesn't even exist.
Mm.
That's when it has to be kind of taken care of, right?
Yeah.
Then you have physical attack, koi aake kar dava, aag lagna, right, and all that, right? So the next slide, we're gonna like break down everything in like a much better, with much better clarity.
Yeah.
So just like in the early on, we talked about like select your commitment, make it specific, break it down, and then let's work together. Like we don't have to be taking everything on our own as an isolator, right?
Mm.
So instead of everything, just focus on selecting one category only that you want to do preventative seva for.
Yeah.
That's it. Like in your Gurdwara, there's like a lot of sangha, right? So you don't have to take on everything, just pick one category. And then the how you pick it, you have to look at what works with your current commitment availability, right? So let's look at disposable one. It requires less resources. Like I think this should be like I also kind of in some one of the articles I say like this should be the starting point. Like if you want in any region, the bare minimum you want to do, let's focus on this one. It requires less resources. In fact, it's like almost no resources because you just need maybe a flyer. That's like one of the things. Within a month, hopefully, we're gonna be able to like have people they can print and talk with Sangat,
Yeah.
and then and especially if we tie to the point about Matadikana,
Mm.
like everybody who's in Gurdwara actually probably has done it like few minutes ago, like within an hour, right? So that becomes like a point we can like talk with anybody. Doesn't matter like how much they close to Sikhi or not,
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter as long as they actually are in the Gurdwara. Literally, that Gurdwara has meaning because of Guru Sahib, right? So it's easy to to open up that conversation, right?
Sure.
So all you need is like explain them how to respect BRB, sorry, how to respect Barney and how to prevent BRB in a smaller way, right? And it's a minimal no training,
Mm.
just a conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't require anything, right? But still, this is a reason. This is something we don't need money. You don't even need money. You can print with your own printer,
Mm.
unless of course you want to argue against it, say, well, my ink cost money. Yeah, but it's negligible, right?
Yeah.
So this is something we can do and prevent a lot of Barney being thrown into dustbins. Now,
Mm.
of course, the main goal is the Mara Swoops being in here, but that's more like a focal point
Mm.
because the way we build up to that is with these smaller, more tangible things. Because if you're comfortable throwing Gurbani in the wedding card and trash can, that reflects your mindset. Like that reflects like where you are, what's your relationship with the Gurbani,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You're right.
So that's where we have to start because at the end of the day, you are a Sangha member. You go to Gurdwara, right? If you're invited to a Sikh wedding, which was a Sikh, let's say the fact that somebody did write a Gurbani on it, so that somehow reflects that you are in a Sikh circle, right?
Yeah.
You are also in a capability to donate, support the BRB prevention. So in this sense, disposable print BRB also builds up that support base, right? And
Mm.
it's again, so minimal training, low effort, it's totally doable. Now then we're going on the totally other side, physical attack. It's super resource intense, consistency, long-term commitment, and you need specialized training. And that's something not everybody can do. It's only for few people. On disposable one, everybody can contribute. It doesn't matter. You might not even know to like read a Mool mantra. You can still contribute it, right?
Mm.
Of course, we want like people to at least know job this stuff. But the point is, this is all accessible. Then again, in decision making, kind of you want to evaluate different options. For example, Agambit BRB is low research. You just need to know like just the basics, like hey, poti sambal karo, seva karni chahiye, right? We need to have like a way to fix older swoops, right?
Yeah.
In fact, one of the weird things I found is there was this one video where they did aggregate of swoops that were in perfect condition. I
Right.
think it
Wow.
happened in maybe Singapore, maybe Malaysia. I don't know,
Right.
but it's there's a video of it on. I didn't put it here because I think it may be like too much to take because I felt like really strongly about it like for a few
Sure. Sure.
days. It took a toll on it, right?
Yeah.
So, but the point is like this is short time to prepare for it,
Yeah.
right? Disposable one you don't need to prepare for anything, but for Agnpay to be able to be right. It's like just maybe a workshop could do it, right?
Mm.
And then the thing that it does require is sort of how your commitment manifests is you have to be vigilant. It's the vigilance, like you need to keep an eye on things going on. Like maybe keep in touch with, the local sangha. Just know like, "Athene gutke paya, okay, somehow you see kat gade gaya, right? We're gonna. It requires more development, so I don't have specifics on that yet. But that's low research, right? It's easier. Now if you go to neglect one, it's slightly more maybe you could say similar, but slightly more, which is like it does take time to kind of prepare for it because you need to training in the protocols, like how you let's say if they neglect ho reha वा, some depending on the situation, the sort of neglect, you might need to intervene at the spot, right? Because you don't want to be waiting for somebody to come and fix it, like it's like satkar, like how do you do satkar, right? Maybe need to know how to properly enter a Sachkhand, right?
Yeah.
So there's like a little bit of time to prepare, and what this requires is inspections. So in a sense, compared to the vigilance one, this one requires consistency, repetitiveness. So you could maybe let's say do once a month inspection, weekly, right? So that's something that needs to be worked on as well. So lastly, we have textual one. This is one that requires proactiveness, just like before Sroop even gets printed, that's when the best time for it to be effective. So you need to be kind of aware, like, hey, if there's like somebody talking about print, because there was an issue where somebody printed through with like a changing load of Gurbani, right? So
Mm.
it requires like just keeping an eye on like what's happening out there, and then it requires a really long time to prepare because you need to do historical research, learn a lot of things,
Yeah.
patience. So if you don't have patience to do research,
Yeah.
and in a sense, it might not even happen that often, right? Depending, it's a different sort of approach to it, right? So you also not just pick for your time commitment, but you also look for what works for you as a person, right?
Mm.
Some people are more analytic, some are action oriented, right? So
Yeah.
maybe you want to be more about neglect. You want to like be there on the spot, like check everything, you make sure, right? On
Mm.
the side, you want to be sitting and researching, on your own, right?
Yeah.
So this is sort of becomes like how we have to be by looking at the specifics, picking one item, and then just dedicating to that BRB.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Just
yeah.
on this actually, it reminded me of an idea that I had a couple of months ago, I think. But I had to backlog it because what it required was too much effort on my part, and it also required me to basically bang my head against the wall with trying to get Bante organizations to comply. Um,
Mhm.
which I just simply do not have the patience for now because of my previous experience trying to do that. So it's something we're backlogged for now, but maybe we might pick up a bit later when we're in a bit better position, resource wise,
Mhm.
etc. But the idea was to basically have an accountable person's register for Guru Granth Sahib Sarups, because a lot of this sort of thing is it comes down to enforceability of the kind of desirable outcomes you want. So if you have a register which we say, okay, every Sarup will have a person who is attached to it, right? And they have to sign a contract saying, if anything happens to the Sarup, it's on my head, right? I got to pay a fine,
Yeah.
or I got to, okay, for a joke in the notes, right? I put amputate a limb, right? Like if a page is ripped of the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup, that's it. One of your limbs have to come off, right? That's how serious you take it. But it's like I don't think we'll probably do that in real life. It probably needs a discussion, whatever, like legally, whatever. How would you even navigate that, right? But the concept is underlying concept is okay. There's a verified person an accountable person, preferably the Jathedar of the Gurdwara, the committee guys, whatever, right? It's on their
Mhm.
heads if anything happens to the Sarup, right? If there's a smudge on the page, if it's a letter's gone missing, or I don't know, wherever, right? If a page got a little ripped, it's their responsibility, and they have to get fined or whatever, as per the terms of the contract, right? And then we create a
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of like list, online database essentially, of all the Sarups that we know of and who are the accountable persons, right? And we give them a status check, right? So any Sarup that does
Mhm.
not have an accountable person attached to it, it should be red flagged. Okay, this is an emergency situation. Nobody's accountable for this Sarup. We need to get somebody accountable to it, right? And that would be the local community who actually, obviously, day to day, day out, would have the responsibility, right? There's
Mhm.
a bunch of other things with the plan as well, like a lot of it. And what I needed to basically do was the actual technology side of it doesn't take that long. That's not much effort. You can set that up within a weekend kind of thing, right? But the bit that requires efforts is compliance. And basically dealing with Goldwater committees and getting them to sign these contracts, getting Bantic Orgs to back it so they can put pressure on, going to Sangat, all this kind of stuff, right? It's a lot of effort. I mean, if you want to start doing it on a localized level, you probably could, right? Like whoever's passionate and want
Yeah,
to do it
yeah.
in a city kind of thing, as you're
I
mentioning
think
here, you could do
you
it.
kind of have to build like a base, build like a disposable print BRB, right? I think that's like a starting point.
Yeah,
Start building that base so Sangha they learn about it. Then you teach them about another form of BRB slowly. Once you build that, say over 2 years, even right,
yeah,
like that's one of the things like I had to like really struggle with was like I knew that this sort of problem needs patience. There are gonna be things happening, but the capacity to make sure that in the future it never happens it
yeah.
requires just this time. So
Mm.
let's say even 6 months is fine. Like in 6 months you build. It's I think you can get significant awareness in the sangha in six months as well.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why like in this next slide like talk about like in the disposal print BRB, what you do is like you just raise awareness. You
Mm.
talk to your local sangat, right?
Yeah,
Then you're tabling during Sundays events, right? And then anyone can do seva, right? Those all these things are listing on the slide, right? All
yeah,
those things I think you could do like once a month, maybe 2 months, right? But then if you want to prevent physical attacks, like some sort of physical harm, then you need roof protection. Kind of
yeah,
connects with what you were talking about earlier on about security, right? That's like
yeah,
some common things. If you read history, that's literally like should be here, but it's not. Like that's what we're doing. Like yes,
mm.
we call it like a yod, like we look in that time. That's what look at. But they were like with like a security aspect, right? You security, you're defending, you're fighting, right? But there's the underlying thing is like that's like those are skills that the same, right? They're not that different, right?
Yeah,
At least like at least the foundation of those are similar, right?
yeah,
So if we go to a physical attack one, you need to understand what it really entails. You need to prepare specialists, right? You need to build the capacity in your area. It's gradually it builds up, just
mm.
like you first build awareness. But this one is like you actually have to first sign up specialists who wanna, become expert in doing it. But then you also have to build enough number of those people. That's like capacity building, and then you're gonna bring about this outcome. That's why it's good to start with one category. That at least you're doing something, and then if you go back to the karma point, right?
Yeah,
It's by doing this, you're earning also blessing of Guru Sahib. Like,
mm.
okay, chalo, like inna kar rahe hai, right? I think it does not take much to I think Maharaj Bade Dayalu ne, right?
Yeah,
So if we do this honestly with like a good dedication, it really it kind of it builds up. That's why categories are important.
mm.
We build up. ਅਸੀਂ ਮਾਫੀ ਵੀ ਮੰਗ ਰਹੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ.
Yeah,
I think we don't get to just say Mara sorry, oops, like that's it. Like you have to show action.
yeah,
And it's good to build up one step at a time with your sangat. At least this is well, I can't predict things, but I think generally like it does build that barakat.
mm.
That's like one of the like spiritual process that happens. जैसे थोड़ा करोगे हौली हौली बरकत है बढ़नी शुरू हो जाती है ना.
Mm.
So that's the thing, right? So now in the next slide we talk about proposal print is easy. You just have a flyer, talk with Sangha, kind of like it's doable, right? Now let's talk about like a most difficult challenge, which we're gonna now figure out. It's not that difficult actually, right? So first thing is the next slide is like BRB and unknown is the security detail of one side.
Mm.
I think it also connects with what you talked about earlier, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
the presidents, everybody like have a security detail, which say Rajan Raja, right?
exactly.
It just it doesn't fit together, right? So, and in fact, in our history, right, we were capable of defeating highly organized armies. Like that's
Mm.
what sets us apart. That even other organized armies couldn't defeat. We were able to defeat those armies, right?
Yeah,
And not only that, we were protecting other communities,
yeah,
right? In fact, we were protecting other communities from the different kind of beadbi, right, of their of their honor, right?
Mm.
But like we can today we can't even protect our own guru, right? And this is a crisis. I think you already said you agree with this. Like, there's only one way out of this, and we have to guard every Srup of Granth Sahib Ji and provide 24-hour without any interruption, every single day security,
Yeah.
right? And in this specific article, if you're curious, you can go into more details. It's not just about that. One thing this talks about article talks about is like, you don't just stand there holding a barsha and that's it.
Yeah.
It critiques like, just we don't want to have exhibitionist sort of thing going on where like you're standing prabhav jab and but when somebody attacks, you don't know how to like use barsha. Like, how do you? What are the protocols? So it talks about like specific protocols that need to be put in place.
Yeah.
Again, that's the whole. This BRB prevention is like a whole field almost. It
Yeah.
needs to develop with all these specializations, right?
Yeah.
We need a protocol. Let's say we attack or that something happens. In fact, you this is like you see in a Gurdwara, you will have great compliance with local regulations for emergency protocols for the building. You will have exits and all those things put in place.
Yeah.
But when was the last time you heard about actual security protocol to, move a troop from Gurdwara Sahib to a safe place? Let's say if Agg lag jandi Gurdwara Sahib nu, which I
Mm.
think sometimes that happen, like, right? I think it takes Sacramento beat the highest, Hopefully there was, I think, a soup, and at that point they had moved it already for other reasons, right?
Right.
But if we don't even have those protocols, like
Yeah.
just a common sense, ਜੇ ਕਿਤੇ ਭੁਚਾਲ ਆ ਗਿਆ, tsunami ਆ ਜਾਏ,
Yeah.
how we gonna deal? Tsunami is about water. How do we protect Gustav from water damage?
Yeah,
Like,
and they
है
should be
ना?
drilled as well. Like, it's not enough just to have the procedure like written on paper. They should be drilled like weekly or daily, whatever, right? So that
Exactly,
when it happens,
exactly.
it's just muscle memory at that point. The team is already just kicks into gear and does it.
Yeah, and that's why the critique that in the first part of the article is about like, we don't need, last thing we need is the people just standing there. And I think if we make an impression that's wo bas hona sab kuch ho gaya. No, it's about you have to specialize in all those things. And
Mm.
it talks about how it's not just people who stand there. It's about the backup support that they have,
Yeah.
right? They need to have somebody doing research in a local area, somebody looking at the weather. Let's say you live in a coastal area, right? You need certain details, right? So it
Mm.
talks about how the reason that's why it's called security detail is that security detail contains different things. I think in the missile net, I think you're talking about also the different like close protection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this goes back to when I was like in a college, right? Uh, I was thinking like maybe police restudy and like going to like police academies, like what can I give the skills? But then my professor told me about the SROOP, what's called executive protection. That's actually a different field, like totally different field. It's focusing on like being um, um, in close proximity and protecting CEOs,
Yeah. Yeah.
people, maybe like they're C-level executives in a company, right?
Yeah.
But that framework is similar to close protection, but the difference is they also put there are different kind of services that account into like the fact that we're dealing with people's life, like daily 24-hour routine.
Mm.
The close protection is slightly different, right? So if we want to talk about Guru Granth Sahib safety, right, we can't. It's these are similar, but they don't really represent exactly what we need
Yeah.
to fully factor in all the things that we need to uh, be taken care of for Gransa. That's why it proposes like the Saru protection framework, where it also includes we need to have those protocols that you're mentioning, right? If the ਅੱਗ ਲੱਗਦੀ building evacuation protocols, ਕਿਤੇ attack ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਵਾ, let's say could be just somebody doing bad, maybe we need extraction, like, right, there's a
Yeah.
um you need to extract to a safe location, safe house. That these are actually security things that people do in the industry, right? Out
Yeah.
there, like this stuff happens. In fact, I would recommend a movie. There's like movie literally called Extraction Part 1 and Part 2, and there's another movie called Close
Yeah.
you can look at. Just if you want to, like, just get a little bit of I don't think they're like so accurate, but this it's pretty good representation of
Yeah. I'll check
those
them
roles,
out. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need those protocols in place, and also we need to train. Just because you know the rat and know how to do sukasan doesn't mean you know how to do emergency sukasan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You might mess up and do actual new be at the spot by
Yeah.
just not
Yeah. Yeah.
being
You might.
prepared in the right. And that's one
Yeah.
of the reasons why we need to have a sick doing those things. We can't just pay money to somebody else to come
Yeah,
there. Because
100%.
what's the point? You're trying to befriend BRB and then you end up doing BRB multiple times. So since route ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ safe house ਜਾ ਰਹੇ हैं, you to like do 10 total BRBs on the way. Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
you have it's you from burning, but then
yeah,
Jode Page, all that. Like how do like and I think Jode Wala is like a sort of dilemma that we need to work through as well.
yeah.
But the
Because
point is,
obviously, yeah,
yeah, this is like a framework that needs to be developed further. But if you are really into BRB prevention and specifically the physical security, you can read this article and get into like more specific details, right?
yeah,
Now, now once we have this framework to see, okay, these are things that are important to protect. The next step becomes like in the next slide, like how do we actually implement those things? Yes, they sound good on paper, like, but how are we gonna do 24-hour security? Like, how are we gonna be able to, find the
mm,
money for it? Like, we don't have resources. Gurdwara committee is gonna come and, start yelling at us because we want them to invest $1,000s per month, right?
mm,
So in the next slide, we talk about Gatka crisis, and this is how we see its problem is not difficult to solve. We have the existing infrastructure, right? So the thing is like, although like it's an institution that comes closer to representing the legacy of Ratan Shaheed. Like if you read your history and look today, what is the reflection of that history today in a visually as well, even with the Shastra Vidya, that is literally Gatka,
mm,
right? The thing is, somehow, for some reason, there has been no at least prominent discussion in social media as well, like connecting that with preventing Paradar, like doing Paradar Seva and preventing Vyadbi.
yeah,
Although there, for example, even Pai Jugraj Singh talked about Paradar, right?
yeah,
It has been, the audio has been kind of out there, right? I think even you talked about those things, and I think every now and then it has popped up, right?
yeah,
But this logical connection never happened,
yeah,
right? So this is a at this point, so like there's also within this institution of Shastra Vidya, we do have a crisis,
mm,
right? And the only way out of and this sort of in a sense maybe they carry a little bit more karma baggage because of that, right?
yeah,
Because you are actually prepared, you are more aware of your history, right? You are I'm not trying to like blame people, but I'm just saying it should be a reason for us to become responsible. And I think about, what we do have the means. Now it goes back to also the point about resources. Like we do have the capability, right? In some areas, like you have team of 20 people, right? If you look up this article, again, if this is something you're interested in. It talks about if you want to have one person, just one person. Again, the framework that we talked early on talks about like multiple people as part of the protective detail. In this case, even one person is like 168 hours per week of continuous payment that you might have to pay like on an hourly basis. And if you have two people, it becomes like thousands of dollars you have to pay per month. So of course, it's going to be difficult to convince any Gota committee. They're probably going to be like, like, "Na pajao hai, to hai na," if you're going to talk about this.
yeah,
But if you think about the Gatka, right, it's literally it becomes easier if you factor in the Gatka infrastructure that we right now. It just takes around 14 people if doing 6-hour shifts in a week. That's it.
mm,
6 hours per week. That's it.
yeah, yeah,
If you want to have, and that's 2 times a week. If you want to have only 14 people Gatka team, like I think with less than that 14, you usually don't end up having Gatka team, but on average is like 10, 15, 20 people, right?
yeah,
So those Gurdwaras who already have developed a team, they are in a position to make it happen,
mm,
right? It all boils down. If you have 28 students, it's all boils down to one person doing 6-hour shift once a week. That's it.
yeah, yeah,
So again, this is more to it, but this is like just like making something that's impossible to solve. Question about resources actually brings down to our resourcefulness and our capacity that we already have.
yeah,
So it really ties back with the Gatka, right? And one of the things about this is that is a few years ago, like one of the reasons I think some of you who might be familiar with the journal page and everything, right, is that she why is this so slow? Like why these articles have come slower than it's kind of weird, right?
mm,
But the thing is that some years ago, that's I tried to do it on a ground level by directly getting into like Gatka space, right?
right,
And that point, there were other reasons why the project didn't work out. That's why I was saying, so you try to do one thing, but it usually doesn't work out because we don't have the existing um, just infrastructure to build upon for like even basic things. Well, there are multiple factors, but in that point, they were like even the teaching of Gatka, like the reason that we bring in Gatka for value prevention is that this really presents an opportunity to now reshape, invest in Gatka, right? Now we have a reason to invest in Gatka and build our own teams. And I know there are students who struggle, who are passionate about Gatka, but they never really get to develop beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
They do some competition, everything, but then that's about it. And then some people really struggle. Some kids want to learn, but they don't have ustad available to their in their region, right?
Yeah.
So there are all those things that come together. So instead of paying somebody else for these services, we build our own capability, and then maybe in fact instead of paying, let's say, 10,000 per month in expenses to a third party, we could literally support our gut team who usually lack funding, right?
Yeah.
We maybe give them a little bit, right? And that goes to a point that you talked about making things sustainable,
Yeah.
and that's when we might find out that we don't need to pay like a full-time wage. For I think for a Gatka student who's really passionate about it, a little bit of sport goes a long way. The
Yeah. Yeah.
fact that they can do sort of fundraising by doing 6 hour shift in a week,
Yeah.
and then they get to do like almost Gatka. They can invite a special star who knows these new things. They want to learn more. They can make a lot of progress in Gatka as a Gatka itself. It,
Yeah.
it's it becomes like a positive incentive, right? That kind of helps develop the whole infrastructure at a local level, right?
Yeah.
So again, if you want to look more into it, you could read a whole article. But that's sort of the point with this Gatka example is that one thing that we thought is so impossible to solve is so easy to solve. In fact, there are teams already that exist there. So now we should shift our focus. If we want to solve this category of BRB, is invest in them,
Mhm.
support them, back them.
Yeah.
Right? If you're
Yeah.
backing them, maybe they'll hear you out. They say, you know what? Okay, I'll do it. We'll start doing it. And in fact, in the example I talked about a few years ago, we had some students who are actually, we want to try this thing out, which was like, let's tell them that in order to become good at Shastra Vidya, you should do Paradari Seva during Atwar Divans, right? On Sunday Divans. So they
Mm.
would actually, like young Sikhs, would stand who are just learning Gatka, they need a little bit, but they were actually doing Paradari Seva with the Nija, right? Whole Nija Fadke they kar
Yeah.
this again, right?
Yeah.
So those things are doable. Kids will do it, right? Of course, there is this balance we need to find out between being actually capable of doing it, like full on specialist professionals, versus realizing that we need to build up to that. So yes, we might not have the best, most trained in the beginning, but within a generation, 5 years, 10 years,
Mm.
we can build up that capability, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I
So
agree.
that's sort of like the kind of concluding part, which is just bringing down this whole big problem into like a smaller scale, local level stuff. So
Yeah.
now, if you are concerned about this, you can just like wake up on the next Sunday, find um, whoever is doing Gatka. If nobody's doing Gatka, ask who wants to learn Gatka, bring us or start them. That's all it takes to kickstart the process. If you have already a team, ask them, hey, what do you need? Funding, give them like this one of your that month. That's how you get started on this right away
Yeah.
by doing that. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And then as the last slide I have is like in order to accomplish this, all the things that we talk about, this is again something that's in development right now, which is like a Pontic instruments, but basically it really means it's tools.
Yeah.
So next slide, this thing we have is like using forms, licensing. Like for example, we talked about earlier, right? If a certain region does some testing, they learn those things. We don't want it to be isolated in there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they use a certain set up a certain Jathebandi, and then that Jathebandi wants to like just gatekeep that knowledge.
Mm.
I mean, this punting instrument is about bringing that culture shift where if you wanna volunteer for organization, it's going to be a premise that the whatever you output should be licensed within with a Pantic license, which makes it right away accessible to all the other regions in the Pant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this is like something you can look at if you're more like how do we make it practical. If you're concerned about all these regional things, you can read more on this one. And then at the as the output of this instruments, there's something in development. Again, it's going to be a slower development, like a stick registry where all these things can be put into one single place. It's kind of open sort of system where people can, you know, people who have licensed the stuff, they can, put their stuff there. You
Nice.
can look
Yeah.
up entities. I think kind of responses to the one of the points that somebody put in the chat as well,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is like you can look up organizations and all that. And actually, in fact, first thing is gonna be like Akade, right? Look up existing Akade and all that. So that's gonna be sort of the thing.
Yeah. That'd be
And then
good. That'd be
again,
good.
if anything resonates, you could reach out, send an email. So at that point, I want to conclude with that slide. Simple,
Cool.
but be at 6,000 to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you for this. This is really good. I mean, we've covered quite a lot here. The whole idea of this, I guess, is to essentially outline a kind of proposal for a problem-solving framework for the band. Um, and I think this does that very well. Like, at the very least, it starts and sparks the conversation. It inspires people to think about how to approach problem-solving with various issues we have in the band. Using this BLB one as an example. So there's lots to hear. There's lots here to learn from, and hopefully we can implement too. And you're right. It doesn't really require the whole band to sort of like unite and then do something. It's like a lot of this can be achieved on local levels. But I guess there is a philosophical shift we do need to make as a band. We need to actually this last slide here was saying it. It goes. It's a really good point you've made as well. So our mistake to Badshed to Gurbani is the root cause of our fragmentation. Therefore, the only solution is going back to Ludivard a prerequisite for unity, and then building Bantic instruments, tools designed to boost our efficiency and collaborative capacity. I mean, like the actual symbolism of that, like, oh yeah, like Barney's being disunited in such a way, right? No wonder the Bant is disunited, Sikhs are disunited, etc. And like to basically make it a prerequisite, like even in my own system that I'm advocating for, like Ladivar Sarup has to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
one of
yeah.
the three, right? So I agree,
Exactly.
and I agree massively, and I think I encourage and I advocate for this because the more we can make it difficult to replicate Sarups of the Guru Granth Sahib, then we create that scarcity of Guru Granth Sahib once again. And then with anything that's sort of like scarce but relative to the demand, the price of that thing, the value of that thing is always going to be high. It's the reason why gold is valuable, because it's not a lot of gold, but everybody wants it. Hence why it's so valuable, kind of thing, right? So Gurbani's got to be like that, because what happens now with Gurbani is it's just an abundance of it. It's no longer scarce, and therefore the solutions we apply to prevent Biabi to Bani, all those resources are now scattered and not consolidated in like this sort of like central areas essentially, right? So even like with Gardaka Academy, Gardaka academies and getting better dars, etc., etc. Like it's unfeasible at this point to get every single Sarup a full-time security detail. But if we start shifting what we constitute as Sarup and making those Sarups more scarce, then we can start allocating resources a bit more efficiently to these things. But again, that requires again a bit more of a wider scale effort. I think in the meantime, we need to just start building the momentum by doing what we can in the local areas we have.
Yeah, and also one of the things I want to connect with the term youth pipeline that you published. That was like really good paper.
Oh yeah,
I think it this is also like something where would you want to rather have a candidate who starts from scratch or somebody who did, let's say, 2 years seva for the month by doing, one of these services, right?
yeah,
Like it just builds up that sort of, it's not just about solution, it's also about like how do we shape people with that certain ethics, that dedication, right?
yeah,
If somebody who chose to dedicate all that time consistently over 2 years, let's say, is a different candidate than somebody who just, there for some reason, right?
yeah,
So I think everything is interconnected basically. So it's something. Hopefully, it helps some people in Bunga as well.
yeah,
But yeah, everything is connected. I think we're probably gonna talk about this more some other time.
yeah. Sure.
But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present this.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and thank you for presenting. This is brilliant. I don't think we've got much time now for question and answer session. We have run over quite a bit. So what I think we should do is I'm going to share all these the links to all these articles on the Bunga story on the Instagram, etc., and the WhatsApp groups, all that kind of stuff. So I do encourage you to read through the articles; they're brilliant. And then also reach out to Baji here with any questions you might have via the email, etc., or their account Sikh Journal on Instagram. But for now, I think let's call it a day here because I'm getting pretty tired now too. Yeah, so So yeah, anything else from you, Baji, or shall we, you cool to call it a day there?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah,
Thank you so
cool.
much for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for joining. Well discussed making a recording of this. I think we had a discussion before, but we'll check. What we usually do with these is that I finish the live and then I send it to the sort of like guest speaker, whatever, and they check through it. And if they're happy with it, or if we cut out parts or whatever, then we just edit it a bit and then we republish it. But thank you guys, whoever did join the whole time. You guys are lucky. So yeah, let's call it a day there. So why did you call Sars? Why did you keep
Are you-
it?